Welcome everyone to the third annual draft for the A Square Cup Series season here for ARCS. Welcome to ABN as we begin the season anew. Once again, here on YouTube, I'm Carmen, Sienna alongside me, the full-time play-by-play commentator for the series, Kevin Young. It's an exciting time of the year. We know that the off-season has come to a close. It is ending. Next week we have the Clash of Daytona. But first things first, we have to determine who's going to be in some of these seats to make up the ARCS A Square Cup Series field. It's going to be exciting. Going to be a little intense as we get through the draft because there are a lot of new names that we get to talk about here. But Kevin, welcome back to the booth. It's been a long off season. How have you been?
I've been personally fine after we signed off at Homestead last year in early September. Well, technically, I guess the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro was the final sign-off. It's been a long off-season. ARCS went through some new changes, as you clearly can see with a new shiny logo. We also got some new teams piling on this grid, and some old fan favorites decided to hang up the helmet and the fire suit, and either go to a part-time schedule or even fully retire. We'll go over all of this over this broadcast as we go through these 3 rounds, but it's been a very, very enjoyable off-season. Now I'm glad to be back here full-time, and as well you, Carmen, you'll be joining us here for at the very least, for at least a month or so until Winsdale gets going. So hopefully they can put on a great show here on YouTube, and hopefully by season's end, we'll be talking about this season as one of the greatest.
For those that are new to the ARCS A Square Cup Series draft, we've gotten some rules that are pretty well consistent as we've seen for the last couple seasons. Each team's made up of 4 cards. Each team per round has the ability to make a draft pick. They've got 5 minutes to make that pick. There's 10 teams this season, so an increase from last year. So we'll see 10 pick rounds. I think last season was 7 pick rounds, so more teams, more entries. Overall, a big positive there. 5 minutes is important. You can pretty much rattle off top draft picks in the first round like they're nothing. It's when you start getting into the middle of the second round and into the third round, or if you need it, the 4th round. We'll talk about that in a second. That you start needing to see more of that time. First pick on the timing board will go up at 7:15 Eastern time, so in about 7 minutes. So we'll see Black Acid Racing take to the draft board first. It is a snake draft. Some people have called it a serpentine draft order. So Black Acid Racing, for example, they pick first. They won't pick again until pick 20, the very end of the second round, and then they'll pick 21, the start of the third round. Basically, round 2 is a reverse order of round 1, and vice versa. There is a round 4 here. Round 4 last season was used to pick up part-time drivers, reserve drivers. That's not necessarily the case in 2025. Now, if you have a round 4, but it is mostly just for teams that do not have team owners racing in the season. Most of these teams will have team owners that are racing with their team. Presidential Racing has Ryan Pennell. Sunday Money Racing has Seth Wansing. There's a couple teams, though, that may not do that. So they will have the ability to pick a 4th driver to fill that empty slot in their team. Again, not expecting most teams to do that, but it is there in case teams do need it. We do believe there's a couple teams that might end up doing that in this draft, and it'll be interesting to see who they pick because that's the 4th round. A lot of the top picks are going to be well and truly gone at that point, so it'll be interesting to see what these teams attack with. But those are the general rules of how this draft is going to operate tonight. Again, it's going to be 3 full rounds, 30 picks, and then the 4th round if we need it, and teams will be able to relay that information if they need that 4th round as we get to it.
Go ahead. I was going to say, and I want to make it clear at the very least, is we saw last year, for instance, even though it's a serpentine or snake draft as point, we look at last year's draft as a good example, and we see the defending champion right now, John Hagan. He was picked in the 2nd round at round 16 by B-Tron. The final 4 was made up of 3 of the drivers. B-Tron picked 16th, Zier was picked at 17th for Presidential Racing, and Gearcats picked up Alyssa Peltier-Sharp at 18. That was 3 of the final 4 last year. So even though it's a serpentine reverse draft, there is still talent that can be found in that second round. So it shouldn't be discouraging for these clubs and these teams to be able to find late round picks, as sometimes drivers fall through the cracks. We know there's some notable names in this draft that we don't really have much info on, but that's what these scouting races that have kind of happened over these past couple weeks and during the offseason A Squared has held to try to give these teams a little bit of extra knowledge. And maybe some drivers have been doing a little bit of good research here to figure out who could be a late round steal to propel their team from possibly maybe being just good to being great.
Absolutely. And you can see the scrolling ticker at the top of the board. Again, that's all of the first round picks that are coming up here in this draft. Obviously, we're going to kind of go through this whole black area of the screen we have pulled up here. Will be filled with information. Once we know picks that have come in, you'll see the previous pick that was made by the last team, as well as who's currently on the clock at the moment. So we're going to have all that information available. For example, you're going to have stuff like this, like our little timer that we're going to have up here on the little board. It's obviously set to 0 right now. We'll set to 5 minutes because that's what Black Acid Racing is going to have when they do start the clock here in about 3 minutes time. We're going to get that information here very shortly as we get ready to go here. Again, that timer is going to begin here very shortly. So we're going to see what they're going to be doing here. So while we've got a couple more minutes, there's always the talk of who are you going to pick in this draft. Obviously, there's been a lot of projections. There's a lot of really good names in this draft. Zach Millett, John Hagen, the defending champion, Zach Millett, who gave him a run for his money last season. Both of them going to be probably two of the first 2 picks coming up here. Daniel Michel, a veteran of the series as well. Yeah, Cody Pennell, Josh Gaiman, Chris Fleming. There's a lot of different drivers that are expected to be in this first round, so it'll be interesting to see what Black Acid Racing pick. The first 2 picks of the draft, Black Acid Racing and Carolina Beagle Racing, they are community-first teams. You're going to see teams that go based off of camaraderie and based off of how they know people work in a team. So it'll be interesting to see if they deviate from that to kick off this draft here as the official timer is begun. So Black Acid Racing is going to officially be on the clock. And again, they've got 5 minutes. Again, as we mentioned before, first round, you typically only need a minute or so. So we'll see what they get to choose from here. A lot of people kind of scratching their heads. Do you take Zach Millett? Do you take John Hagen? Those are going to be really important questions that they have to ask here. Both of them bona fide studs, both of them absolute race winners as we get this party started. And we know now, about 30 seconds in, and the pick is in. So the timer has come to a stop here, and it is going to be Black Acid Racing who have made their decision. So obviously we'll have ARCS Commissioner Ryan Pennell come in here in just a moment, and he will announce the very first pick of the 2025 ARCS A Squared Cup Series draft.
And just to butt in before Ryan does come on in here real fast, I don't think there's any situation where you can go wrong here. You got the defending champion in John Hagen, and you got one of the studs of the league as well in Zach Millett. Both very strong drivers and will make a team a top contender no matter who they go with. It's like an NFL draft in real life where there's 2 top quarterback prospects, and you can't really go wrong with either ones, unlike in recent history, where when there's 2 quarterbacks at the top, one seems to go a little bit more in one way, and the other seems to go in the other. But Black Acid Racing needs this kind of pickup. After last year, they took a step back. They were a really struggling team. Markowski was one of the only shining stars they had. Made it to the round of 16, got 2 top 5s and 1 podium at Talladega. But other than that, it was a rough year for Black Acid, and this is a good chance to back it up and try to come back with a strong season this year and take a run for the constructors. But personally, if you ask me who I'd be taking with this first overall pick, call me maybe a bit biased. But considering I said last season in the second round, Hagen was the steal of the draft, and I felt like he was going to be the name to keep an eye out for, I feel like I got to go with John Hagen on this one. He won the championship. Millett will be just as good as strong, and it will be a tense rivalry between those two and a lot of other drivers. But if I'm Black Acid Racing, my card would say John Hagen on it. And it looks like Ryan Pennell, the commissioner of A Squared and ARCS, is heading up to the podium now to announce the first overall pick.
Yeah, absolutely. Good night tonight for the draft. Got a lot of people watching, so obviously this is always a lot of fun. It's going to be a little different this year. If the owners want to make their picks, the owners will actually come in here and make their picks. But I'm making the first overall pick tonight for James Kerr and Black Acid, and Black Acid Racing has selected Dale Markowski first overall in the draft this year.
That's a big deal. Dale Markowski, Kevin, you kind of hit on the head. Dale Markowski got them into the playoffs last season, did a fantastic job of that. 25 career ARCS A-Square Cup Series starts. He's made 177 ARCS appearances total, and he's got 3 wins to his credit in his ARCS racing career. Just hasn't been able to win in the A-Square Cup Series, but Black Acid Racing really feeling comfortable with Dale Markowski. They want him to return in 2025, so he will be the team's leading pick to kick off this draft.
It's an interesting pick here. Obviously, you were hitting the nail on the head there, Carmen. It's a team of commodity. It's a team that likes who will gel well, and they've seen James Kerr and Markowski really hit it off well here, and it seems like a good pick. Now, I do ponder a little bit. Maybe they could have got Markowski in the second round, but he was a good driver. Looking at his PR ranking at the very least, puts him out in a decent spot, at least in the field, that there is a chance that he may not have been on the board when they swung around here. So just ensure you get the star you think will bring you to the promised land. They think it's Markowski, and they want to lock that in rather than taking a risk. So that will move us on nicely to the second pick of the draft, which will be piloted by Carolina Beagle Racing by team owner Stefan Oberstadt. Chevy team in the making. Not many Chevys or Toyotas in the field. One of the few outliers. They had a good season last year, fell off near the end. They had some good picks with both Cheney and Wygant, but overall the team had a rough finish to the year. Looking to make a bounce back year this time around, and they got about 4 minutes and 38 seconds now to try to think out who they want to be. The question is now, Markowski was just taken off the board. There's still a lot of good drivers out there. Where are they thinking, and what are they going to do? Are they going to stay commodity, look for a driver that helped them out last year, or maybe go with a wild card pick and go for one of those top drivers on the board?
Yeah, that's the very interesting question that teams are going to have to deal with here on this. Carolina Beagle obviously now on the clock. And now they've got an absolute breadbasket to choose from. Again, they can choose their committed group, right? You got Patrick Oberstadt, Austin Mongold in that group as well. You would have to take. You do not want to let Zach Millett and John Hagan both drop to the 3rd and 4th overall picks. You can't do that. You just can't. It's so hard. And as I mentioned before, you're looking at teams right now that have oftentimes chosen community and camaraderie over outright pace, outright competitiveness. But you've got to take a splash here and grab one of these game-changing drivers early. They believe in Dale Markowski. Obviously, Dale Markowski, he was a rookie last season in the Cup Series. So as a sophomore driver, they believe that he's going to do better than just making the playoffs this year. And it's a really easy sort of bet to make on. You have that information here, as Carolina Beagle Racing has taken a couple minutes, and it looks like they have submitted their pick here for the draft. So second pick is in. We'll stop the timer here. So this is going to be absolutely interesting to see what they do with this draft pick here. So obviously they will come in here. I believe Stephen Oberstadt might be the one to announce this pick here in just a moment.
He is in the chat, obviously in the YouTube chat here. By the way, if you are on the YouTube chat, make sure you sign off and show you here. Maybe throw a few predictions out who you think will be the draft here. Obviously, Markowski in the chat right now, looking happy and poised to be the first overall pick. But I do think Oberstadt will be, as he is in the A-Squared chat, the actual voice chat. So he may be joining us here shortly. If not, we'll be seeing Ryan back here as well. But again, a lot of good drivers. Again, if they go commodity here with their pick or someone they know they can work with, it's going to be maybe a few teams like Presidential Racing, Dirty Air Motorsports, Raggy Racing. They are going to be looking and salivating a bit that there's some good drivers falling down in the draft here that they can maybe go double up on and get 2 decent picks if they open up here. So right now, Carolina Beagle, a lot of names they could still pick up. Again, we always said Millett, Michelle, Shell, Hagan, Gaiman, and Pinnell your top 5, but as well, they may go commodity and go with Patrick Oberstadt or someone else around those lines as well.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out. Again, they've made their second pick, so their pick is in. They've confirmed that with the ARCS officials here. They're just waiting to see what this announcement is going to look like here as everything comes up on the board here. Again, we were expecting Zach Millett and John Hagan to be the first two picks. Zach Millett was not picked first overall. That was Dale Markowski. That was picked by Black Acid Racing. So we'll see here very shortly what Carolina Beagle Racing have decided to do here. Ryan Pinnell is walking up to the podium to announce the second overall pick in the 2025 draft.
Yep, second pick in this year's 2025 A-Square draft. Carolina Beagle Racing selects Cody Pinnell to race for them in 2025.
This is very interesting. Obviously, not a bad pick at all, given Cody Pinnell's experience here in the draft. Obviously, a former race winner. He's got 4 A-Square Cup Series race wins. He's a former playoff driver. He made the playoffs in 2022, was a contender there when Jeremy Breo won his title that year. So Cody Pinnell will jump up. He was expected to go 4th in this draft, so not of too far of a stretch there. Cody Pinnell going 2nd overall in this draft, and that leaves it very interesting in the hands now going through this draft order, because I believe it's going to be SRD Motorsports now that gets that pick. I have to believe
you would be
here.
correct. Yes,
So
it would be
SRD
SRD
Motorsports. They're now on the board, and they still got Zach Millett, John Hagan, Daniel Michelle, and Josh Gaiman to choose from with these picks now off the board. So that is going to be so interesting to see now to see what they pick here. But SRD Motorsports now have the lion's share. Not how we were expecting these first 2 draft picks to go by any stretch of the imaginations.
Yeah, definitely on the point. Heck, considering the last 2 years we've had, Josh Gaiman went first overall both years. There could have been a shout that Gaiman could have went first overall and make it a trifecta. But to kind of go back to Cody Pinnell first before we talk about the new team in SRD Motorsports. Cody Pinnell, again, the stats show themselves: multiple wins, made the playoffs 2022. The only real thing I would say kind of holding against him is, to a degree, is consistency issues, where he's kind of not run a full-time schedule the past 2 years. He's now officially signed up to be a full-time driver, and he showed good pace in the races he ran on not a part-time schedule, but not really a full-time schedule. Did run some good races, got decent finishes throughout here to get the point. Obviously, only 11 starts there and got no wins, but a few top 5s. So overall, a good driver, fast, top 5, top 10 car you can get out of it. Why he was ranked so highly on the draft board to begin with, but we'll have to live up to that number 2 overall billing. But now to move forward onto SRD Motorsports, the new team in the chicken coop, along with a few other teams we'll go over later. Jonathan Smeal is the team owner of SRD Motorsports. Obviously, you've seen him throughout many different series under the ABN Studios umbrella, along with A-Square. He's made a ton of paints for a ton of different cars. They looked rather clean and beautiful. Other than that, though, he's ran part-time the past 2 seasons. The question is whether or not he will run at all this year. There is talks he may end up taking a pick in the 4th round. We'll obviously see when we get there. Other than that, though, kind of an interesting commodity. We haven't really seen him lead a team before, per se. And the question is, can he lead this team like he has led Minnesota in the College Football 25 dynasty that A-Squared has? Can he lead them to great success like he did there? Or will it be a situation where he's going to have some rough goes, like a lot of new rookie team owners go, where they kind of struggle in their first year?
And it takes about 2 minutes here. Their pick has also now come in. So again, these picks not taking forever to get in. So SRD Motorsports will be on the clock now, and their pick has come in. And this is going to be very interesting because now they've got free reign and free selection here on this. And this is going to be very interesting to see how all of this plays out as we go along here. Again, Zach Millett, John Hagan, Daniel Michelle, Josh Gaiman, all of these very familiar names in the ARCS A-Square community. And they're all available here. And now what is pick number 3 for SRD Motorsports, and that means Presidential Racing and Dirty Air Motorsports. Ryan Pinnell's team there, 4th pick of the draft, and Kevin Feemster's team, Dirty Air Motorsports, the top 5 pick. They're going to get a really good championship contending driver here. But we know now for a fact that SRD Motorsports have submitted their pick here, so we're going to know for a fact how this is going to play out here momentarily. And again, it's going to be a huge question as to who is going to go where. John Hagan, the defending champion, not only not the number 1 pick, which we were kind of debating on during the offseason, would Hagen be the number 1 pick? Not only is he not the number 1 pick, he's not the number 2 pick either. So both the top 2 draft picks, based on records that we've seen so far, have really sort of slid down the draft order immediately. Whereas Daniel Michel was expected to be between 3 and 5, Josh Gayman's expected to be between 3 and 5. So this is their window to be in. Chris Fleming could pop up one spot there. He was expected to go from 4 to 6. Edward Marshall is expected to be a late first-round pick or early second-round pick. Same with Vincenzo Iacovazzi. You've got a few drivers here. There's a couple of rookies in this list as well. Christian Angel, Steve Tucker, all expected to sort of be in that late first round, early second round phase here, as again, that has come in, and Ryan Pennell back up to the podium in quick order to announce what is the 3rd pick for SRD Motorsports.
Yeah, SRD Motorsports with the 3rd pick in the draft takes John Hagen.
John Hagen, the defending series champion, has finally been selected. He is off the board altogether, and it was a really big deal figuring out who was going to get the defending champion. That leaves Zach Millett on the board. That leaves, obviously, Josh Gayman on the board, Daniel Michel. A lot of good top drivers still on the board. SRD Motorsports with John Smeal leading the helm there. Thanking championships, and who better than the defending champion, John Hagen, off the board at pick number 3.
Yeah, what's there not to say about John Hagen? 9 wins last season, 16 top 5s and 10 top 10s, walking away with a championship. Obviously had a few close shaves at a few rounds, was definitely a top driver throughout the year. Only thing you could really fault him is he didn't win the 500 and didn't bring the constructor home for B-Tron. But other than that, did everything you could ask for really in a season, bring home the championship and bring home the Rookie of the Year and win a crown jewel on the way as well. Now, obviously, Hagen's going to have, there's been always situations where drivers have had sophomore slumps in both real life and in the fictional world as well. The question is, can Hagen keep this good form going? Or now that he's not a rookie anymore, more of a known commodity, can drivers maybe bring the thunder against him and try to overtake him and make a run? Obviously, we talked about Zach Millett, for instance, the one driver that was able to go blow to blow. Brandon Fedleplace was also able to go blow to blow. Zier, a few others. Obviously, Zier's not in this year, but talking about last year, there's a lot of good drivers on this board still that could easily bring the pain to John Hagen. And the question is, now you're just giving them more bulletin board material, getting drafted later and later in the draft. So moving on now, we are going to team 4 here, and that's going to be the one and the only Presidential Racing, held by the commander of A Squared, Ryan Pennell, and the president. Obviously, the team last season had a great season, to say the least, brought home a decent run. The constructors ended up finishing, I believe, 3rd, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Roberts brought the team 2 wins in the playoffs, even though Roberts did not end up making the playoffs. And Lilac Zier, speaking of her, she also brought the team to a Final Four appearance as one of the first in Presidential Racing's history. So overall, it was a good season. Pennell, obviously, at the end of last season, said he was stepping away from full-time competition, going to try a part-time schedule here to try to overall bring some success and find that elusive victory lane in top flight A Squared competition. But overall, Presidential Racing known to find some good drivers, maybe some good projects here, and now they have the pick of the litter here. Will they go with the, maybe not the obvious choice, but definitely the more logical choice in Zach Millett? Or maybe they'll shock someone. They worked with some other drivers in the past, like Josh Gayman or Daniel Michel or Edward Marshall. There's some good drivers here they could also shock with as well. So Presidential Racing still having well over 3 minutes and some change on the clock. What is Ryan Pennell thinking here?
Well, we're not going to have to wait for too awful long because Presidential Racing's pick has come in. So 4th pick in the first round here, going to be Presidential Racing's choice. And again, you mentioned he's worked with Josh Gayman before. He's worked with, obviously, he's seen the amount of work that Zach Millett has done. He could also go for a little bit of that familiarity and kind of pick a driver that he's had on his team before. You know, you look down the order, you know, there's still a lot of drivers left that maybe wouldn't traditionally be number 1 picks. We didn't think Dale Markowski was a first round pick, but he went pretty quick with Black Acid Racing there. Obviously, you've got Elris George on this draft board. If you're looking for familiarity, he's right there as well. Realistically, though, I think if you're Ryan Pennell, if you're trying to win races, Zach Millett is 7 race wins and 19 starts last season, on top of being the Nissan champion, what was their Xfinity Series back in 2023. he knows how to find gold in quick order there. So we're going to find out really quickly what Presidential Racing have decided that they're going to go for here. What direction is this team going to look like as we get in? Ryan Pennell stepping up to the podium to announce his own draft pick for the first time in 2025.
Yeah, I liked what you were saying, and I'm going to keep with that. We're going to pick Zach Millett for our first round pick.
Big time gains here. The two winningest drivers from last season now off the board. It took a little bit longer than we were expecting. Zach Millett will lead the Presidential Racing squad, that Ford team looking to get to victory lane frequently amongst the 25 race season in 2025. Ryan, thank you so much for that draft pick. We move on to Dirty Air Motorsports. Kevin Feemster now, who has less options available than he had just a few minutes ago. But that's not the end of the world either. Dirty Air Motorsports obviously are going to have Josh Gaiman on the board. You would have to assume that he's going to be a top 5 pick. Daniel Michelle is also in that list. Chris Fleming, who Feemster's raced with frequently in the High Octane series on Saturday nights. So we know for a fact that there is still plenty of choice on the board there for good old Kevin Feemster here, as his timer now begins at 5 minutes here on the clock.
And obviously, real fast, talk about Zilla. Obviously, we were talking a lot about him, but what's, again, not much to say. 7 wins, 13 top 5, 16 top 10s last season. If not for a real fluky incident that happened in the penultimate race of the season, probably would have been in the Final Four going to Homestead and taking a chance to race for the championship. But still, Miller going to learn what he learned, now having a full season now to try to accumulate points and make a run for it. He'll make his new home in Presidential Racing, and Ryan Pennell will definitely welcome with open arms. But now moving on, like you said, to Kevin Feemster's Dirty Air Motorsports, new team on the grid. Like you were saying, stepping up the team ownership. Feemster made the playoffs the last 2 years, has been a beacon of consistency throughout the grid. Definitely a driver you can count on to bring the car home and get you a decent finish, but is looking to maybe make it a little further in the playoffs in the last 2 years, as he's been a first-round exit both years. Now trying to keep it going here and try to maybe make that next step. And maybe if he gets a good co-star with him, that could be the one to propel him to higher heights. Obviously, the rough draft, the mock draft we did earlier that we went through different names, has the driver on the board here being Josh Gaiman. But like you said, with the push down of both Dale Markowski and Cody Pennell kind of shaking things up, it opens the door for Daniel Michelle, for instance, to possibly be in the wings here to be picked up by Kevin Feemster. Obviously, Josh Gaiman as well. And then you got some new unknown commodities. We haven't said much about him. Chris Fleming, Vincenzo as well for the as well as another driver, Edward Marshall, Chris Goins, Christian Angel is kind of your top 10 here of high PR rankings. So overall, a lot of drivers, and it looks like they have now officially submitted their picks. We will not be waiting long here to find out who Kevin Feemster is going to have be one of the top drivers at his new team, Dirty Air Motorsports.
No, it's not going to take very long at all here. They saw who was on the board between Michelle, Gaiman, Fleming. Obviously, you got Marshall, you got Iacovazzi there, Vincenzo Iacovazzi, who's raced in the High Octane Series as well with Feemster. You got Christian Angel, who I think is, I think an under the radar pick right now. Christian Angel, Chris Tucker. Chris Tucker's made 4 starts in the A-Square Cup Series. He made those starts last year. Got 4th at New Hampshire, so he's got a commodity to him as well. He's expected to be a late first-round pick too. He could be someone that could be swept up pretty easily here. Chris Goins. You got Nicholas Martinez, David Wright, who's a 2-time race winner here in the A-Square Cup Series. Lily Pelletier Sharp's a 2-time race winner in the A-Square Cup Series. So there's still some very interesting names on this board here. Ryan Pennell stepping back up to the podium, so we will know now what pick 5 in the 2025 draft is going to be.
Yeah, with the 5th pick overall, Dirty Air Motorsports picks up Joshua Gaiman.
Pretty obvious selection there. Josh Gaiman off the board now, almost exactly where we thought he was going to be here in pick 5. I think we were off by 1 in terms of where we thought he was going to end up being. But Josh Gaiman, playoff contender every year he's been in the A-Square Cup Series, 2022, 2023, 2024. Now he's trying to go for a championship here. He's going to try to do so leading Dirty Air Motorsports to that punchline there. So that's going to be very interesting to see if that can be the case. But once again, staying with the 4 teams as everything gets going once again. So Dirty Air Motorsports selecting again Josh Gaiman. He is now off the board at pick 5, and that puts Raggy Racing now on the board.
And speaking real fast on Gaiman, again, was a Final Four driver last in 2023, looked poised to take the championship, if not for a late season blunder. Meanwhile, here, again, consistency did not find victory lane last year, though. That's probably going to be eating at him at least a little bit, but was still a driver that was at least strong in the playoffs, made it to the round of 8 before bowing out there. So overall, Gaiman, strong driver. There was a reason why he was the #1 draft pick in the previous 2 A-Square drafts. He's a hot commodity and a fast driver, and he should bring great success to Dirty Air Motorsports. Moving further on, we go to the next team in line. It's going to be Raggy Racing. Pilot, now a new team owned by Matthew Kent, running Chevrolet. So again, one of the few Chevrolet teams on the grid. The law of A-Squared is now ready to try to hit a new team to glory as well. And at the very least, though, if they have at least some successes, he did run part-time at least last season, ran in a few Pocari sweat machines that looked chef's kiss. But overall, though, pilot to driver, he has got some good speed on him, and he knows how to find talents. He's watched all the races last season from eye in the sky. The question is, did he do a little bit of homework while he was up there and find the driver he wants to go with and maybe lead them to great success? Obviously, Daniel Michel seems to be the leading choice here at the very least, as he was #2 in the preseason rankings. But it's interesting that he's fallen so far. Makes you wonder, why is he falling, at least at the very least, all the way down to the very least pick 7?
Yeah, it's very interesting to me seeing how all this played out. Again, not how we expected any of this really to sort of play out at the beginning. Obviously, we got back to normality with Josh Gaiman going pick 5. We still have Daniel Michel and Chris Fleming on the board here, so now it's time for Matthew Kent to sort of take his time to really pick things up here and figure out where he wants everything to be here, as the timer continues to go now, 90 seconds plus for Raggy Racing, and they've got a bunch of picks that they can make here. They're sitting basically in the middle of every single round as things currently look. So it is going to be very interesting to see how all of this really sort of plays out for the Chevrolet team. Again, Dirty Air Motorsports made their pick. That was Josh Gaiman, who has a bunch of accolades on him. And Raggy Racing, after just over 2 minutes, have decided that they have made their pick. So their pick is officially in here. So Raggy Racing now is on the block. They've made their pick. We will know soon who this will be. And it's going to be very interesting to see how they go, because we're over halfway through the first round. This is where you start trying to figure out where you want to sort of sit with your draft picks. So Raggy Racing with Matthew Kent will get to make that determining factor here. Again, right now it looks like Daniel Michel, Chris Fleming would be the top 2 picks looking at the mock drafts that have been made up going into this. But there's a lot of drivers in that mid-range between first and second round that you can sort of just plug and play at this point. So we'll know what Raggy Racing is aiming for here momentarily.
And it looks like momentarily will be soon here, as it looks like Ryan Pennell is about to step up to the podium here. So we'll see what Raggy Racing is thinking and who will be the 6th overall draft pick here in the first round of the A-Square draft.
Yeah, with the 6th overall pick, Matthew Kent with his new team this year is going to go with Steve Tucker.
This is interesting. Steve Tucker was expected to go beginning of second round. He is a rookie this year. He's only made 4 career starts in the A-Square Cup Series, so still a rookie driver, but a top 5 finish in New Hampshire last year. Definitely put some highs on him going into this season. A lot of people were expecting he would go with Sunday Money Racing. Instead, Raggy Racing has looked at the stats and they said Steve Tucker's got a bigger upside there, so they'll take him as pick number 6. Steve Tucker now off the board, and with Boy Esports now the team on the hot seat here, as they will now have to make their pick for the first round.
Honestly, I do not really hate this pick all that much, as Steve Tucker, even though he made, again, few starts in this series last season, now going to be officially a rookie, he was still someone that was at least decent in the races he did show up in. Definitely maybe not the strongest driver, but when he filled in, he came in, he was a top 5, top 10 driver, even had a chance at knocking on the door to try to find a way into victory lane. So overall, I kind of like this pick. It's a little bit of an interesting pickup here. I'm not saying, again, I don't want to discredit the owner here. Definitely you pick the driver that leans to your heart here, but it's an interesting one at the very least. But obviously, Steve Tucker, very happy he picked up in the first round here, and seeing him in chat right now, he is definitely over the moon. So Steve Tucker going to be the lead driver at Matthew Kent's new team of Raggy Racing and should lead him to high success. Moving on now to Bowie Esports, owned by Brandon Featherplace, the only Toyota team on the grid, taking over from the ashes of Line Power Motorsports after the team that Brandon Featherplace drove for the past 2 seasons, leading them to 2 Final Four appearances and 2 Constructors Championships. Now can they keep the success of Line Power going here and try to propel this into this new team? Featherplace has a lot of choice, like we said, but I think this is going to be where Michelle goes here, as Michelle and Featherplace were teammates. And going over the interviews, I know last season, talking to Featherplace, talking to Michelle, there is good points. They seem to have a good commodity relationship at the very least. They seem friendly. They seem like they worked well together. So I feel like this is a good building block, per se, at least with Michelle. But again, we've seen curveballs happen. We've seen a lot of shocks in this draft, and it's kind of blown up both mine and Carmen's mock drafts here. So the question of the day is, what is Featherplace thinking? Trying to get over that hump, find his way to a championship, and even try to find a win, as it's been over a year plus since he's found victory lane. Who will be that driver that maybe either gives him that motivation to get over that line, or maybe gives him the help to get his team and keep the success going from where Line Power left off?
Took about 2 minutes here, but Bowie Esports has made their pick here. They have submitted their pick. Again, they are pick number 7 here, so we're almost through with the first round here of this draft, and it's going to be very interesting to see what they have submitted here. As you mentioned, obviously Featherplace, one of the more tenured drivers in the field. Edward Marshall's on this list. Obviously, they were teammates when they raced for Line Power. But Featherplace has raced with a lot of drivers there in this field. He is pretty wide open on where he goes at this point. But again, 7th round pick. We're going to know soon who that's going to be. Michelle, Fleming, Marshall, Yakovazzi, and Christian Angel were all expected to be first round picks. We know now at least some of those drivers will not be first round picks. The question is, who will be? As we know, Ryan Pennell will walk up to the podium here momentarily to give us that answer.
Yeah, Bowie Esports has submitted their first round draft pick, and they are going with Ross Baxter.
This is a very interesting pick to me. Ross Baxter, not expected to be a first round pick at all. Wasn't expected to be much of a second round pick. 25 career A-Squared Cup Series starts. He only has 1 career pole position. He has no wins, only a couple top 5s in the A-Squared Cup Series. So this, much like what we saw earlier in this first round, this feels like a community and a camaraderie pick over a competitive win races now sort of pick.
I think you're correct on that. Obviously, Baxter had 2 top 5s, top 10. He was the pole sitter, or at least the front row starter for the ARCS 500 last season. So overall, again, you want to go with a driver that you know. You want to go for a driver you work well with, because if your top star per se, your first round draft pick is who you think is going to be, besides yourself, obviously, is going to be one of your stars of the team. You don't want to be going at each other's throats week in and week out because of it. And at the same point, you don't want someone you don't really know that may not be consistent or maybe a troublemaker and getting the pedalies or whatever. You want something you know can be a safe pair of hands that, if they may not be the fastest, at the very least will make sure they come in week in, week out and give it their all, and in turn bring in a good finish week in and week out. So obviously, Featherplace and Baxter really seemed to hit it off last season being teammates, and it looks like Featherplace wants to keep that going with Ross Baxter now bringing, presumably he'll keep the 60, bringing it to Bowie Motorsports. That will move us on to pick number 8. Almost done with the first round here. A couple more teams to go, and that will pile us on to another new team, the last new team we will see here out of the 10 teams in 1MA Racing, with Bren Roberts being the team owner. Obviously, Roberts was your silver bracket champion last season, missed the playoffs by about 10 points or so, won 2 races in the playoffs, won back-to-back, and easily could have been a playoff contender if he ended up making the playoffs, showing that he is a driver that knows how to step it on, having multiple win seasons, both in 2023 and 2024. The question is now, can he be a driver that can also be a good team owner and lead his team to great success here. Looking at the drivers available again, we obviously said Daniel Michel. They were teammates back at Sunny Money Racing in 2023. Obviously, we got some new drivers like Fleming and Vincenzo, Edward Marshall as well, another top 10 driver. And as we move on with these later draft picks, he's also got to be thinking in the back of his mind as well. He's got a pick maybe about 5 away from here. So he's got this pick, and then he'll have another pick in about 5 picks when the draft snakes around here. So he could realistically say, hey, I'm going to get maybe a top star here, someone I think's a top star, or maybe get someone that may be a little bit lower on the board, and then try to hope that another decent player is on the board here. So the world is the oyster of Bren Roberts here, and as we have about 4 minutes to go here, a lot of good choices in the candy shop. What is the driver thinking he's going to take?
It's so hard to pick this. Obviously, and draft pick is in too, so this is really quick here for 1MA Racing. They have gone ahead and moved quickly here. As much as I want to kind of have the idea that 1MA Racing is looking at the top of the board, we've seen so many community and camaraderie picks for these teams to kick off this draft. Jared Merchant's the one that sort of sticks out in my head as being one of these names. Former 1MA Racing driver Jared Merchant and Bren Roberts close friends, along with Jacob Blankenship, who has appeared sporadically part-time since the 2022 season. Merchant being in this draft, it would sort of lend credence that might be a go-to pick there for Bren. Again, it's sort of just you figure out what the vibe is at the moment. I don't know where 1MA Racing is going to sit here, but we are going to find out in quick order what they've picked for their first round draft pick, because this is going to be, again, we weren't expecting it to be quite this almost like a game of twisters for sort of figuring out who's going where.
Yeah, you're not wrong on this one. And it's questionable as well, because you look at it, obviously, we look at analytical mind here. We see drivers on the board like, oh, it should be, top order. But we got to think the human element as well, just like in baseball. You can always say, oh, analytics say take player X out and put in player Y or keep him in there. But at the end of the day, you got to go with the feel, the heart, and the kind of the human emotion. And these owners are really thinking about what they know will work best and what will try to lead great success. So we're moving on now as we see Ryan Patel stepping up to the podium here. 1MA has already submitted their pick quite early, and he will announce who the lucky driver will be. That will be number 8 pick in the draft.
Yeah, 1MA Racing has made their selection, and they're going with Daniel Michel here in the first round.
So we expected to be a top 3 draft pick. Instead goes at pick number 8 in the draft here. So that's a big ordeal. Daniel Michel, though, is going to be a first-round draft pick, as he was last year when he got picked by Sunday Money Racing. So we know that Michel is a consistent top 10 driver. This will be no different here. 49 career A-Square Cup Series starts, 3-time race winner. Importantly, he has the record most 13 career pole positions in the A-Square Cup Series. Next closest person, Josh Gaiman, has 11. So Michel's got that pretty well beat. He's a qualifying beast. He's a point-scoring beast. And now he's on 1MA Racing as they look for championships here to kick things off.
I think that's one of the faults you can kind of say when you brung that up right there is he's definitely good at one-lap pace. But we saw, at least last season, he won a couple races in 2023. But in 2024, he ended up going winless and only got 3 top 5s. And I believe all 3 of those were podiums. So overall, another driver that kind of went a little bit hungry and had a down step last year. It's going to have to keep that good race pace going and keep the tires under him if he wants to keep the season going, try to contend for a Final Four berth, trying to get his first of his career. But overall, though, if he can get everything going right, he will definitely be a driver that can bring the pain to the top contenders of the field. Moving on to now the 9th pick in the draft. It's going to be picked up by B-Tron Racing, headed by Jeremy Braille as a team owner. They have been back-to-back drivers champions, so whoever maybe gets picked here has at least a good chance to win the championship, and in turn also has a high chance to win the 500, as B-Tron has won both back-to-back ARCS A-Squared 500s as well, the Daytona 500. So they have won both as well. The only question mark we can say is Braille obviously last year announced he was stepping away from full-time competition. He's one of the other team owners. It's been rumored that he may not be in the part-time mold and may have to use a 4th-round draft pick as well. But the question is, what is Braille thinking? Will he maybe try to come back in the 4th round? We'll get there when we get there. But going back to B-Tron, he has a good eye for scout, a good eye for talent. Has obviously done that with 2 drivers champions and 2 500 wins. And he's also got a championship himself. The question is, though, he's trying to get that first Constructors win for B-tron, as that has eluded them with Lion Power taking the top step the past 2 years. So trying to find maybe the last jewel in his crown here, Braille, and who does he think that driver may be? And looking at what's available, it's a bunch of new faces, like we said, Fleming and Vincenzo, Edward Marshall, Chris Goins. A lot of interesting names here. I don't think they're a team that usually goes commodity, but right now, obviously, quickly submitted their pick here. So whoever they saw, they instantly snatched up quicker than a bird switching fish out of the ocean. And now the question is, what was Braille thinking, and who is that lucky driver?
Yeah, we're going to find out pretty quickly here, and this is where you sort of, with B-tron Racing, they're so good, they're so proficient on the plate tracks here. You sort of have to sort of cast your mind to potential plate racing specialists here that have done well without being a part of that squad, because B-tron Racing have dominated so much of Daytona. You have to again, most of the drivers that we were expecting have not quite gone where we thought they would be. This is where I would probably not choose Fleming if this is sort of the vibe that we're looking at with B-tron Racing. I don't think I'd go for Edward Marshall. I think you do look at someone like Giacovazzi. You do look at someone like Chris Goins or Colin McDonough, who seems to be pretty proficient on these plate tracks as well. Or you look at someone, you look at someone that may give the team a boost on a different type of racetrack. Lily Pelletier-Sharp won at Daytona last year. Won 2 races, one at Richmond and at Daytona, the summer race there. Later in the season. So Pelletier-Sharp's got that veteran experience. She's also a winner on road courses in different competitions. So we'll find out where, but we know that pick has come in. Pick 9, the penultimate pick in the first round. And I know that Ryan Pinnell is stepping up to the podium to make that announcement now for B-tron Racing.
Yep, B-tron Racing has submitted their first round pick, and they are going with Patrick Oberstadt here in the first round.
And that's a big pick. That's another driver that's very proficient on these plate tracks. We knew what they were looking for there, and it is not a surprise here. And they get to pick again in short order too. They have picked 12 later on to begin the second round. Sunday Monday Racing get to make 2 picks back to back. We'll get to see what they end the first round with here momentarily. But Patrick Oberstadt, a really big pick there for B-tron Racing.
I do wonder what Carolina Beagle is thinking as well, as obviously the Oberstadts are brothers, and that is going to be an interesting situation. Now, obviously, Carolina Beagle and B-tron have had partnerships in the past, so this is a situation where it should be no harm, no foul. They'll still work together and whatnot, but that is obviously a good come up for Patrick, as he has now found a decent team to go around. Obviously not Carolina Beagle, a bad team either, but obviously a lot of good teams in this draft. But overall, though, good pickup. Patrick was, again, a consistent force last season, finished decently well throughout the season, but again, looking to take that next step going into next season, but is a strong driver in the plate tracks and is another consistent face that will get you consistent points week in and week out. That moves on to the last pick of the draft, of the first round anyway. Sunday Money Racing, owned by Seth Wansing, now back under the Sunday Money Racing banner, as last season they were Tombstone Motorsports. Obviously, what's not to say about Sunday Money Racing? 2023, they had a great year overall. 3 of their drivers made to the round of 16. Wansing, a couple corners away from becoming a 3-time championship. But last season, they took a step back. Wansing had a rough year with connection issues, and the team itself was kind of struggling a bit. Only kind of bright spot was Proudfoot, who ended up making an all-right run in the playoffs, ended up taking a win or two, especially with that tire strategy save at, I believe it was it was Nashville. We had a great tire save strategy throughout. But Wansing looking to rebound here, and his reward is he'll get good back-to-back picks here. So he'll have equivalent of 10 minutes to get 2 drivers that he thinks will be bringing his team to glory here. And like we said, looking at the board here, he could easily go a commodity pick and maybe a driver that is a new face. Maybe he goes 2 new faces. Maybe he goes with 2 commodity picks. The world is the oyster of Seth Wansing, and right now, as we see, he has now officially submitted his pick. So these drivers not taking a lot of time on this clock. They're not waiting it out. Now, obviously, first round we expect it to go very, very quickly. As we get to those later rounds, we may see that clock get under 2, 1, or even close to 0. But Wansing, at the very least, feels confident in his first pick. And he gets a bit of an unfair advantage as well. So now, as we wait for this pick to be announced, he can already be thinking about that second pick too. So we'll see what Seth Wansing has cooking up in the oven.
Yeah, this is going to be a big deal. I mean, Sunday Money Racing, obviously, they're trying to rebound here after what they consider to be a bit of a down year. Wanzing obviously more motivated than ever to try to get that third championship, and especially as the A Square Cup Series field just gets more and more competitive. That's why you see so many people lined up for this draft. You look at just the people that are trying to be drafted here. You're not going to see everyone get drafted. You're going to see about 20 different drivers not on the board at all by the time this draft is over. So it's something you have to really try to get into. So these drivers that are getting selected, they've showed to these team owners that there is something there for them to compete for, and we're going to know really quickly at least where Sunday Money Racing's direction is starting here, as Seth Wanzing himself will make the announcement to end off the first round of the draft.
All right, fellas. And hello to everybody at home with the 10th pick in the 2025 A Squared Draft. Sunday Money Racing selects Edward Marshall as the 10th pick.
Big time news there. Edward Marshall off the board as the first round comes to an end. An expected first round pick for Edward Marshall here. 21 career starts, 3 career poles, and a brief tenure with Line Power Motorsports. But we know now Sunday Money Racing, one of the leading Chevrolet teams, will begin with Edward Marshall as he tried to pursue his first career win in 2025. So not a bad pick at all for Sunday Money Racing. The Chevrolet team going to try to aim for higher heights. And we get to hear from Seth again momentarily and not too far away at all, as he's got now pick number 11 coming up here very shortly.
Yeah, if you take your mind back to 2023, Marshall was a nice driver. Was definitely one of the leading forces in Line Power taking the constructors that year, as he was consistently top 5, top 10 for the races he did participate in. Took a bit of a step back last year, did not participate in only one race, according to what my stats say. So overall, now to be back in the full-time entry. He showed glimpses of good pace in that 2023 year. Ended up getting 3 poles, as you can see on the graphic screen there. So overall, trying to keep that going and try to find his way to victory lane. But now, Wanzing again, we'll hear from shortly with the rules of the draft in question. He now gets back pick. But here's the concerning factor if you're Wanzing. You got to make this pick count, because after this, he will not pick again, and we will not hear from him again to maybe an hour plus later, as he will have the last pick of the 3rd round and the first pick of the 4th round if he needs it. But pick is in, and it looks like Wanzing is here quickly, and we'll see who he's going to pick up and try to be the co-driver with both Marshall and himself. Who will be the rear gunner?
With the first pick of the 2nd round and the 11th overall pick of the 2025 A Square Draft, Sunday Money Racing selects Elliott Longenecker as their 2nd round first pick.
This is very interesting. Obviously, for those not familiar with Elliott, pretty easy to be mistaken on that. He's only made 2 appearances in the A Square Cup Series, only 4 career ARCS appearances in the iRacing era. So he has been pretty far and away from being at the forefront of the conversation. However, for those that remember Team Sideswipe, what was one of the incarnations that sort of split up into what we see now with Presidential Racing and Sunday Money Racing and Beatron Racing, Elliott was a big part of that team here. So that is not a surprise at all. Elliott Longenecker will now be the first pick in the 2nd round here for Sunday Money Racing. We won't get to hear from Seth again until pick 30, the last full-time round in this draft.
And I do wonder, as I was alluding to it, obviously he's not going to pick till round 30. I wonder if he may have picked the driver that he thought, hey, there's a chance Elliott would get taken somewhere between pick 11 and pick 30. So I want to make sure I lock him down now and make sure I have him in my driver lineup instead of taking a chance and maybe having someone like 1MA or Dirty Air Motorsports or even Carolina Beagle end up taking him. So maybe an insurance pick, maybe someone he felt confident with, or maybe he liked the first name because, he is a Hendrick boy. So maybe he liked the first name Elliott. But regardless, it's a good pick up there, and we'll see what he can do here going now back to full-time competition. So moving on, we now head back to Beatron Racing with Jeremy Braille. Take your mind back to me about 10 minutes ago. It was Patrick Oberstadt, the first pick for Beatron. And now, who are they thinking for the 2nd pick? We know they're a team that likes super speedway drivers, drivers that are good, consistent forces. And obviously, again, knowing the pedigree of what they bring to the table, they can find diamond in the roughs. So looking, again, we'll keep bringing these names up here. And like you said, Carmen, there's a good chance some of the names we bring up won't be picked up maybe to the end of the second round, maybe the third round, or even a chance they may not even get picked at all. And if that's the case, we may see them take on a privateer entry role, maybe trying to find an opening somewhere where drivers end up dropping out. But again, Vincenzo, Chris Flemings, Chris Gones, Kristen Angel, Matt Fordon, Mike LaJoy, all decent drivers. Most of those being rookies, excluding Gones and LaJoy. So, question is, what is the helm and the leader, Beatron Racing, Jeremy Braille, thinking here?
I don't think it's going to take us very long to figure out who that's going to be here. Their pick has come in. It only took them about 30 seconds for their pick to come in. So we're going to know very quickly who they're going to be. Again, Patrick Oberstadt being one of the drivers there. Beatron Racing, we're expecting to use all 4 picks in this draft, not just the normal 3. So they've got to make sure they've got people that are able to fill in and be a dominant force and be a leading force when Jeremy Braille is not present. So that's going to make this even more interesting to sort of follow along with, to see what the mental process it is going to be for that team. Again, very new sort of situation there for the team going into the second round.
You can definitely say that again. It's all hands on deck. It's about finding the driver that can step up and be ready. Question is, what is Jeremy thinking? Obviously, we'll find out in maybe less than 30 seconds here, as Ryan's presumably going to be walking to the podium here shortly. But again, just take the opportunity while you have the second. Well, we'll hold that thought as Ryan is now stepping up to the podium. And who has Beatron Racing taken for the 12th overall pick?
Yeah, Beatron Racing has selected Jonathan Adams for their second round pick.
I like this draft pick here for Beatron Racing. Obviously, Jonathan Adams, another driver who is really good on these plate tracks. Obviously, he's made appearances. He made appearances in HTL. He's raced in ARCS before. He's someone who I don't think's had really the breakaway to be a star yet. He's made 17 starts in the Ace Quick Cup Series over the last 3 years, so it's been sporadic for him trying to break into the team. But now he's got an opportunity to do so alongside what we're assuming is going to be more plate racing superstars as this draft goes along here. Beatron Racing picking another one with Jonathan Adams now going at pick number 12.
Yeah, and I think personally, I could say 2 thoughts. One, I think they may be rating a bit of the Carolina Beagle draft board here. So we saw that last year too, where Beatron seemed to be every time Carolina Beagle wanted someone, Beatron was like, all right, we'll take that and yoink it away from them. But obviously, again, being in the technical alliance, or at least a good friendship partnership, can be good as both teams want to see good success. Obviously, Adams was the first overall draft pick for Beatron last year. So Braille obviously seeing something in Adams, and even when I was watching these broadcasts last year, he showed great pace. It just seems like he was, if any driver was bitten by a bad luck bug, it was Adams, who always put the car in a good qualifying spot and end up in either an issue of his own doing or someone else's doing, and you end up finishing poorly, and then eventually even made some good runs there by the end of the playoffs and in the playoffs as well, just trying to get some good finishes. So Adams, I think if he can get it together and maybe get that bad juju off him, he's definitely a one to watch out for. As we saw in the HL Truck Series, for instance, he ended up getting a couple wins once he kind of got everything in the right order. So I like the pick by Adams. I think he's a sneaky fast driver. He's just got to be able to put it all together. So now back up to 1MA Racing. They obviously picked in the first round Daniel Michel. Now Roberts again, knowing he's got at least his good friendly driver Michel. What's he thinking as well? As we've seen, obviously a lot of these teams pick drivers that have been commodity. At least one of their picks has been a driver you would consider is a former teammate they worked well with or something. So we'll see what Roberts is thinking. Does he go with a driver he's been a teammate with before? Does he go with a new face? There's a lot of questions. And since he's not going to pick again until pick number 27 or 28, I should say, when we see him again, he's got to make sure this pick counts and he gets the driver he wants, whether that be a driver he thinks the pure raw talent or a driver he thinks will get picked sometime between here and then.
Well, we know that 1MA Racing have submitted their pick now, so we know for a fact that they are ready to go. It took them about 2 minutes to get everything put together and in order here for 1MA Racing, but we're going to know shortly who that's going to be. Bryn Roberts trying to put together a team of race winners. sometimes that's easier said than done, especially now that we're into the trenches of this draft. But there are some really good drivers still left to go. Obviously, we know now that Bryn Roberts is looking at the bona fide, the diamonds in the rough is what we're looking at here when they try to put all this stuff together. And there's some diamonds here that I think could end up being commodities for 1MA Racing here. Looking outside of Jared Merchant in that obvious team connection that they've got there, you still look at Chris Fleming, who was he's going to be a rookie in the A-Square Cup Series, second in the championship last season in the High Octane Series that we ran on Saturday nights. So he's got pedigree to him as well, just not at the Cup level. David Wright was a playoff driver, 2 career wins in the A-Square Cup Series, 54 starts, and he was also a contender in the High Octane Series last year. Again, you look at Pelletier Sharp, you look at Connor Knowlton, 9 wins and 53 total ARCS appearances. Obviously, he's more of a short track guy, raced in the ARCS Racing Experience and in the only short track series that we've seen run sporadically. You saw ARX on Fridays, only short tracks runs currently running on, I believe, Sundays. Sundays or Mondays. I'll have to double check on that. But Connor Knowlton, a 6-time winner in that series as well. He's only made 2 starts in the Cup Series, but he's got something to him as well. You've got Tommy Withers also on this board as well. He's got a race win. He's got one of the most longevity-based careers in ARCS right now. So there's obviously a lot of good stuff going on just throughout this board still. It's just a matter of sort of what you're looking for and what's the team lacking at this point. Where do you think you can really sort of poach some of this talent from? We're going to find out, though, in very short order who believes in what. Ryan Pinnell, who is 1MA Racing selected.
Yeah, 1MA Racing with their 2nd round pick does go with Connor Knowlton.
Big time deal there. Connor Knowlton, a diamond in the rough, expected to be a late 2nd round pick. Instead, he will go near the start of the 2nd round. And as we mentioned, his pedigree, while not Cup Series related, one of the better resumes going into this draft for a Cup Series rookie. Connor Knowlton will now try to back all of that up and do what Zach Millett did last year, and that is put up a lot of races in very short order to kick off the season.
Yeah, I think Connor Knowlton, he obviously was drafted last season by Line Power in the 2nd round. And I think it's kind of a second chance pick here. As we saw, Knowlton was fast, but Knowlton also kind of ruffled a lot of feathers the wrong way. And I'll get to that point in a second why I bring that up. But this is a good kind of second opportunity for him. He's gotten a team with him. He's kind of grown over the year. They know he's fast, but he's got to kind of clean it up a little bit. And I think this will be kind of his chance to show, hey, I've improved. I've shown why I can still be fast and prove his point. And obviously, when we're talking about this again in 2026, we may see him be a 1st round draft pick. So overall, going to use this second chance, you could say, to really show why he maybe belongs on A-Square grid and deserves to be contending for wins and whatnot. But that brings me to my good point, as now Bowie Esports is on the clock again. There are some drivers we brought up in that list, like David Wright, a few other regulars, maybe in the A-Squared series, that have ruffled some feathers, that may have made some enemies. And that can be a factor on whether or not you get picked up, because if you're a head case, and I'm not saying David Wright is a head case, I want to make that clear. I'm just using an example. I know some drivers had sent complaints to him during these interviews at the end of the race, at least last season, so I bring him up in that reference. But there's a lot of drivers that maybe considered head cases are hard to work with or too aggressive, wool in the rack, and you don't want a driver that's in and out of the sin bin week in and week out, getting points penalties and putting your team in even a worse spot, even if they are fast. So they got to be careful and kind of smart with their choices. And at the end of the day, do you pick a driver that's fast and go with a driver or do you that may be a bit of a head case that could have a high upside, but you have to keep them in line? Or do you go with a safe pair of hands that maybe not has the better upside or maybe the higher ceiling, but has got a good floor and will consistently bring the car in week week out and not get your email box filled with a bunch of rage emails? So we'll have to see what BUE Sports is thinking. Obviously, first pick was Ross Baxter, which was a little bit of a shock here. But again, it seems like they're going commodity over overall mock draft rating. But again, there's some interesting names here left on the board, a lot of rookies. So the question is, Featherplace kind of being the veteran of A Squared, what is he thinking here? What is he looking at?
we're not going to have to wait too awful long to figure that out. They have submitted their draft pick with 1:45 off of the timer here. And again, this is interesting trying to read the minds. Obviously, I think the mock draft boards have been pretty well thrown out the window at this point. Now it's just a matter of curiosity, figuring out who's got what going on here. Again, with Brandon Fetterplace, obviously his first time genuinely leading a team in the A-Square Cup Series and having to make these decisions. Typically, he was with Tom Sears in Line Power Motorsports and when these decisions were being made. So it's going to be it's a very interesting sort of dynamic that we're seeing now with some of these newer team owners here. We know that their pick has come in for the second round here. And just like what it was before, with their first round pick, Brian Pennell will be the commissioner for ARCS. Will come up. He will make their he will announce their draft pick here. And just kind of looking here, you're starting to look at a lot of the veterans here that maybe have not quite had the longevity or not quite had the accolades here to be a first round pick, but have had the experience. They're going to know how the series operates, the ins and outs here. And this is where it really truly gets wide open here. So Ryan Pennell, the commissioner of ARCS, will walk to the podium. He will announce the next draft pick here for Bowie Esports.
Yeah, Bowie Esports has submitted their second round pick, and they are going with Brian Dixon with the 14th overall pick.
This is an out of left field choice. I would probably have to make this assumption here. He is a complete rookie. He has never appeared in ARCS competition before. He's raced obviously in iRacing outside of ARCS, but he has not made a start, not in ARX or High Octane, OST, ARCS Extreme, or anything along that sort, not even Thursday Night Thunder or Saturday Night Showdown. He is a complete ARCS newcomer, but he is going to be driving for a team that is obviously going to be trying to immediately come into the force of the A-Square Cup Series on the right foot when we go to Daytona. This is going to be very interesting to sort of follow along with. Obviously, Brian Dixon, now the pick for the second round pick for Bowie Esports, pick number 14 overall with Raggy Racing now, the next team to be on the clock.
Yeah, looking real fast at Brian Dixon here. Obviously, the only thing we can really say about him is where he was on the preseason ranking, and they had him slotted at P32, just between Tommy Withers and Austin Mongold with a 74.9 ranking. Now, to be fair, a lot of these drivers in that lower half, like from just looking at real fast, from set 30th, 33rd, all the way to 13th, are separated by about 10 points or less. So there is a good chance of slight fluctuation, and obviously with less starts, some of these names can obviously be higher or lower depending on that ranking, as A Squared only had a certain number of stats they could go off with, and obviously with no looking at Brian Dixon there as a good example, not racing in much to any A-Square competition. The only thing he really had to go off with is a couple test races. So again, Featherplace clearly sees something in the lad, and I think definitely a interesting pick here, but we saw that work again last year where we saw a lot of drivers in the first round pass up on some regulars we've seen in other series, and it worked great wonders. So again, there's a good chance that Boom Esports and Brandon Featherplace see something in Dixon that maybe both of us have not yet or haven't seen at all. So we'll have to keep an eye on them as the season progresses. Moving on now, the Raggy Racing with Matthew Kent obviously picked up a good first round pick in the first round, and now moving on to a second pick. And I'll take the line I said from you, Carmen. We're not going to wait long, as they have submitted their pick with less than 59 seconds passing on the clock. So whoever they had in mind was clearly still available, and they want to snatch them up quite quick.
This is where things get really interesting here, because again, you have a lot of race winners still on the board as well. Obviously, you've got a lot of drivers here. Chris Fleming's on the board, Vincenzo Iacovazzi. You've got David Wright, Lily Pelletier, Sharp. All of them are race winners. Tommy Withers is a race winner. You've got a lot of veterans here: Mark Dila, Michael Lawrence, Brian Rupert. You've got Josh Battles. You got Austin Mongold. You've got Davey Hauk. A lot of drivers here. Brian Rupert's also a veteran here. Do you take some of that veteran experience? And if so, what side of that spectrum do you go for in those decisions here? We're going to find out in quick order. Ryan Pennell stepping up to the podium to announce the second round pick for Raggy Racing.
Yeah, Raggy Racing with their second round pick goes with Alyssa Pelletier Sharp for their second round pick.
And this is, ironically, not far from where we expected Pelletier Sharp would go. Middle second round for Pelletier Sharp, two-time race winner in the A-Square Cup Series, on top of being a race winner in the HTL Cup Series as well. So different race wins there. Obviously, for those on ABN, very familiar with Pelletier Sharp through the ABN Champ Carbold Series as well. Pelletier Sharp now will be pick number 15 on the board. Raggy Racing, the Chevrolet squad, will have Pelletier Sharp on board, and she's going to be a asset for the team as they try to put together a race contending squad. Pelletier Sharp's definitely going to be a positive, not a negative on that.
Yep, she made the Final Four last year, and obviously when the chips were down, she won at Bristol. Obviously, she was pretty much in a go or go home situation at Bristol. She made an alt tire strategy work, and she hung on old tires to bring that car to victory and cash her ticket to the round of 4, I believe that actually round of 8, and then had a good Final Four to make it work. Yeah. So overall, she also won the money race at Phoenix as well. So she knows how to get it going when the clutch she needs to come in. So overall, a good pick here, and obviously she's in the chat right now. She'll probably fire off with excitement here as we see a few of other of her friends and drivers that have raced with her in other series, like you said, the ABN Champ Car Series, giving her some congratulations. So I think a good pick. I think she was a little bit slept on there, at least a little bit. Obviously, former teammate as well, Michael Lawrence, also firing in as well. So overall, I think it's a good pick. I think definitely a strong driver and definitely brings you a good consistency you need at a new team. Moving on now to Dirty Air Motorsports. They are now on the clock here. Kevin Feemster's last pick was Josh Gaiman. So taking some of the old drivers from Gear Cats, almost had a chance to reunite two Gear Cats drivers in both Sharp and Gaiman, but sadly it was not meant to be. Now, what is Feemster thinking? He's obviously been with two different teams in 2 different years, Presidential Racing 2023 and Prophecy Motorsports last season. So he's met a lot of different faces throughout the series. Being a veteran of ARCS, has known a lot of different drivers. Does he go with a veteran of ARCS? Or does he take a chance on a new face? Well, some of these new drivers that maybe unknown, maybe have questionable pedigrees, maybe not liked by some. What is Feemster thinking? Does he go for friend or does he go for fastest?
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to sort of figure out where Kevin Feemster's mind is at the moment. And again, very quick moving. It almost feels like round 2 is moving faster than round 1. Dirty Air Motorsports have made their pick exactly 1 minute into their pick selection timer. They have made their pick, and this is a team that we've seen pick a little bit more on the side of veteranship and experience than just looking at the flashiness or looking at the shiny new driver list that's available here. They've typically strayed towards the side of drivers with a bit of experience in these A-Square Cup Series cars. So not expecting it to be any different here. It's just a matter of who Kevin Feemster sort of believes will be the biggest asset here for the team. And again, that's just it's so hard when there's so many drivers that fit that criteria. It becomes so much more difficult to really put all of that together and feel comfortable with that pick.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Kevin Feemster, he will be the second team owner to join us here at the podium, as he is now officially in here now to introduce his second pick here in the draft.
Yeah, how are y'all doing tonight? With the 16th pick in the second round, I'm picking a friend that I've raced with for many years, and that would be Mike LaJoy.
Mike LaJoy, one of the veterans of the series, going at pick number 16. So Dirty Air Motorsports continuing to pile on veterans with experience here in that team as they get ready to launch in 2025. Mike LaJoy going to have a little bit of familiarity going into this upcoming season. And that's exciting, obviously, for Mike LaJoy. That's not a bad selection by any stretch of the imagination. Mike LaJoy, for those that maybe aren't familiar, he's been a quiet force, sort of just looking on the sort of browsing and perusing throughout the order here. 31 career starts in the A-Square Cup Series. So he's not a consistent force. He hasn't been a consistent force. He's got 9 top 5s, 18 top 10s. So he's been a consistent top 10 force. He raced with Black Acid Racing last year, I do believe.
Yes. Yes, he raced from both years. So yeah.
So yeah, he's a consistent force, and obviously you look at his records. He's over half his races. He's been in the top 10. So that's a really good choice.
Actually, he drove for Next Gen Racing last year, which then eventually became Bandit Racing.
Gotcha.
So overall, he did race for Black Acid in 2023, though, which was his more successful season. As 2024, he did have to step away halfway through the year, but he was the driver that was knocking on the door. One of the bright spots of Next Gen. Obviously, you don't want to sleep on Painter and Catania and Garrison, but he was definitely one of the leading forces at that team before they became Bandit, and in turn when Zach Millett came to town. But overall, definitely a consistent driver, someone you want on the team. Again, good pick for a second-round pick, and I think Feemster kind of get nail on the head. You knew what you're working with. He's strong, fast, and consistent. And if he can make the whole season, could definitely be a driver that could be a playoff contender. Now, obviously, we're getting into pick number 17 here. That is going to be Presidential Racing back on the clock with Ryan Pennell. And it's interesting because if we use metrics and knowledge, if we assume by draft or where drivers get picked, our top 16 playoff would be theoretically these 16 drivers that were named before it, as in theoretically, you pick the 16 best drivers, they would be the first 16, and in turn the best chance of making the playoffs. So we'll have to keep an eye on that and see if the drivers in turn they picked end up making the playoffs in the order they end up getting picked up. But now, President Racing already have submitted their pick. Ryan Pennell, again, 30 seconds burned on the clock here. Again, sees what he wants, and he wants to get it. I do have a hunch where he may go in the third round, but at least in the second round, it's not going to be long until he gets that third round. We'll see if he goes commodity or someone with pure speed, as Pennell stepping back up to the podium again to announce his own team's draft pick.
Yeah, so Presidential Racing with our second round pick is going to go with Christian Angel.
This is someone we expected to go at the end of round 1. Instead, he'll go almost at the end of round 2. Very interesting to see how that played out there. But Christian Angel, one of the newer drivers, one of the rookies coming into 2025, who has a measurable upside here going into the ARCS community. Someone that we, as the general consensus, will blend in really well and be in the upper echelon of the A Square Cup Series. Should be contending for top 10s out of the gate. Should be contending for top 5s and race wins within pretty quick order for Presidential Racing. Now, we know that for sure. He will be joining the Ford team as their second driver on the board. Obviously, he'll join Ryan Pennell, the team owner, as well as their previous draft pick as well, to get everything lined up here. Remember, Presidential Racing previously signed Zach Millett as their first round pick. That's how far Zach Millett fell. And so you have Zach Millett, Ryan Pennell, and now Christian Angel, one of the higher rookies on the board. That's a potent team for Presidential Racing to look so far with it, for them having one more pick remaining.
Yeah, obviously we'll go over a full kind of opinion of who we think the best team is by the end of this draft, but I think you're kind of on the right point. I think Presidential Racing definitely has a good lineup right now. Obviously, don't want to see about some other lineups. 1MA Racing is another interesting name. B-Tron, Sunny Money. They have some good names as well. I think other ones, again, I don't think there's really any truly outliers here, and I don't think anyone has really picked a driver that we've sat here and scratched our head wondering why they were picked here or there. Everyone feels good on their picks, and they feel like it will bring them the best success heading onward. So now going on to SRD Motorsports, obviously Smeal back on the clock again here. He's going to have a quick turnaround here after he picks this driver. Going to be seeing him again in about 5 picks time. So what is he thinking? And again, having the advantage of the snake draft is you get your first overall pick, you have to wait a little bit, but then you get maybe 2 consistent names to really be either co-drivers or, co-stars to yourself and your star driver, or end up being just as good as drivers. This was around the picks where, again, I alluded in the pre-draft of the stream, or at least the pre-show of this stream, is that this is where the money rounds, where a lot of the top contenders last season were taken, in both Hagen, Sharp, Zier, Wygent, and a few others that were very strong throughout the year, or, well, in most cases, and in turn ended up taking the fight and making the Final Four. So there is some good chance to find some steals here. And with a lot of those rookies still sitting on the board here, this could be another name added to that list that maybe by the time the playoffs start or even the Final Four, when we get to the last round, could be saying, hey, how did this happen again, where a driver got picked late second round, where it looks like speed-wise should have been a first overall pick?
Well, John Smeal's not going to make us wait too awful long here at all. Obviously, they've got a lot of experience, obviously, from the AR. John Smeal's had a lot of experience racing, obviously, throughout ARCS as in general here. One of the big mainstay people in the ARCS community. Obviously, he runs the ARCS Racing Experience. He's raced in A Squared for years. He's raced in SNS. He's raced in Thursday Night Thunder. He's seen a pretty good wide array of the drivers that are in the series and those trying to get in. So he's going to be able to make that selection here pretty quickly. He's going to have a pretty good gut check here as far as being able to make these determinations as we look at this year. Now we're looking at the point now where you're either going with a completely brand new rookie or you're picking a veteran that is yet to break through at the top level here. So this is where it gets a little more difficult to make those sort of decisions. We're going to find out, though, as Ryan Pinnell walks to the podium to announce the 18th pick of the 2025 draft.
Yeah, SRD Motorsports with the 18th overall pick is going to go with Matt Vorndran for their pick here in the second round.
Matt Vorndran, an ARX veteran. He has done a lot of work on the dirt side of things, racing in a lot of dirt races, but raced on the pavement in the ARCS Racing Experience as well. He is a newcomer in the A Square Cup Series, but having been in ARX, that was his introduction. That was his doorway into the ARCS racing community. So SRD is sticking with someone that they have seen firsthand up close, as Matt Vorndran will be the team's second pick in the 2025 draft. And remember, SRD's a team that might decide to use that fourth round as well to put together their complete lineup here if John Smeal's unable to make the full season. It was SRD Motorsports and B-Tron that were rumored to be the two teams that might need that fourth round to really complete their lineups.
Yeah, and obviously Vordan in the chat as well. We'll see if he fires off in a second with any words of encouragement. But again, obviously being being a rookie, obviously having ARCS racing experience, being a veteran in the SRX series and a few others, this is a kind of an indoor for him, and this is a chance where, again, being active in the series, racing in other series, is showing up on Friday nights, Thursday nights, Wednesday nights, whenever A Squared is doing a series, or ARCS, I should say, is doing a series, or even some of the series where ARCS have a lot of their drivers in other pools and other series like HTL and a bunch of other leagues throughout the iRacing network of leagues. This is a good chance where you can get buddy or show some speed and come on in. This could be a chance where you get picked up and maybe, again, be something that flies under the radar of some of the other names. Moving on, we're moving on back to Carolina Beagle Racing. They are on the clock, and a lot of the drivers we thought they would have picked ended up getting poached by B-Tron and both Patrick Oberset and Jonathan Adams. Right now, they have Cody Pinnell, which was their second overall pick. And again, we're going to keep talking about it, and we know by the time this comes home, there's a good chance some of the names, maybe in this top 10, like Fleming, Vincenzo, Chris Gones, have yet to be picked. There's at least a small chance maybe one of them is sitting on the couch and has to be a privateer going in to next season. Now, obviously, we're still at least a round away, multiple picks to go before we see that happen. A lot of teams may still pick them up in the third round. Like we said, we still got some series regulars, like David Wright hasn't been named yet. Davey Hawk was a good pilot for that car. He was in it as a privateer last season. He's not been picked up. Bailey Thompson showed it for a couple races as long with the All-Star race and showed some good speed. Tommy Withers has yet to be picked up. Austin Mongold, who I wouldn't be shocked B-Tron picks up in the third round. If not, Carolina Beagle picks him up first. But overall, there's a lot of veterans and new drivers, and it's now Stefan Oberstadt's chance to decide what intrigues him the most here, as, again, once he picks here, he's got maybe about the equivalent of 10 minutes before we see him again. So he'll pick a driver. Again, you're probably thinking pick a driver that either you like or pick a driver that you don't want the top team in Black S Racing to take before you come back.
This is where it gets interesting because a lot of Carolina Beagle, we talked about it, a lot of the drivers that were on their draft board are gone.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously B-Tron kind of scalped them of their draft pick selection pretty quickly there. But a lot of the drivers that were from that Carolina, obviously it almost speaks well of Carolina Beagle's ability to just develop drivers. That all of them have been poached this year after being in Carolina Beagle, whether it was in ARCS or in HTL or in and about obviously the sphere of stock car racing around ARCS. Now that they've become commodities here, so now Steven Oberstadt's got to sort of take on his shoulders the ability to sort of develop more drivers and try to turn them into bona fide contenders as well. So he's got a completely different challenge than some of these other teams. But I think that is a good set of pressure to have, knowing that you've developed these drivers to move forward onto these different teams. And these teams believe in them to be race winners, to be contenders, and to be improvements on their team. So huge deal for Steven Oberstadt to look into this.
Yeah, and speaking of how much he's thinking, Carolina Beagle is taking the longest time we've seen tonight here. They're now under 2 minutes, caving towards 1:30 here. They really want to make sure they get the driver they need, or maybe just milking the clock out for pure excitement, wanting to be one of those teams that really likes to build up the success here. The question mark of the day is obviously the clock runs out by some chance. Let's say Stefan does not get his card in. Assuming it's similar to the rules like the NFL and other drafts, the team obviously next in line can leap them if Carolina Beagle does not get their card in at the time. So as we get close to 1 minute to go, you know for a fact Black Acid Racing, if they see a driver they want, may be ready to jump the gun here and get them if Stefan can't step to the podium with now 1 minute and some change to go.
This is where you do not want to be caught off guard here with 1 minute left. You have a couple easy choices here, and it looks like with just about 1 minute left, they have decided that they are going to place a pick. So they are taking themselves off the board here with about 55 seconds left in their pick selection timer. You were completely correct. So them losing the 5-minute timer, it doesn't mean that they lose the draft pick. They remain on the clock. It's just that Black Acid Racing would have the ability now. Their 5-minute timer would begin, and they could make a pick before they did. So that was sort of the concern that was about to pop up here if they had needed that all that time. So we're going to know now for sure Carolina Beagle has submitted their pick for the second round. And again, we'll see them again at pick number 22 as well. So we're not going to wait very long for them to get another chance at filling out their team here. It's just a matter of they had to wait. They waited. They took them a whole 4 minutes, if not longer than that, to really put together what this pick was going to be for them. So they need to make sure that they get this right. And obviously, we'll know now from Steven Oberstadt himself. He's going to come in and announce who's going to be on Team Ralph in 2025.
How we doing, guys?
I'm assuming we're doing a little bit easier, since it's not been as stressful for us on this end.
Yeah, we're not.
Honestly, my draft board is just slaughtered right now. But we are very happy to announce that we're going to take my man from the Xbox days, Vincenzo Italiano.
That's a good pick as well. Someone we expected to go in the first round, slipped down to the end of the second round. Vincenzo Iacovazzi, someone who obviously raced in the Xbox days there with ARCS, but came into the iRacing world 11 months ago. He's been on iRacing less than a year. He's already been someone that was sort of earmarked as a blue chip prospect for 2025, whether he got to race in the A-Square Cup Series full time or whether he raced again in the High Octane Series or in SNS or in TNT. Someone that seemed to have that upside to him alongside that of Chris Goins and Chris Fleming. Upside is not sold very well in these first two rounds, but we're starting to see some people banking on that here now. Vincenzo Iacovazzi, the second pick for Carolina Beagle Racing. He'll be Team Ralph in 2025, and Steven will get to complete his lineup here in about 10 minutes.
We'll see you then.
And there he will go. Obviously, see from him shortly. And the question of the day is, what will he do then? Obviously, this is where, again, knowing the history of ARCS goes way back. Obviously, they raced in the old Xbox days. This is where making, again, friends back then. Again, you can cash in those chickens now, and we know Carolina Beagle knows how to develop prospects. So if there's a home you want a blue chip prospect to go to, this is probably the place you want to go here to get the best development under him to make sure he gets the best speed and raw potential out of Vincenzo. So moving moving on to Black Acid Racing, they will have basically their last 2-round picks here, and if they need a 4th-round pick, they will have the choice, but they will get the last of the litter. But obviously, it looks like James Kerr will partake in the season and try to go full-time, so this will likely be their last 2 picks here. They better make them count. They obviously got Dale Markowski, who was the driver in question, the 1st overall pick, a driver that James Kerr was strong with, raced the whole season last year, and considered a good enough driver to be taken with the 1st overall pick. And looking at what they picked last year, let's just throw out the other 2 names. Joshua Battles and Brian Rupert were the other 2 in question. We know Battles is on the board here. He could possibly pick along with Brian Rupert. They are both here as well. The question is, will Black Acid Racing roll it back like they did last year and say, I want the drivers that I know are friendly with? Or will he maybe shake it up a little bit and end up going with one of those drivers, or maybe none of those drivers, and take some of the other drivers that are currently still on this big preseason ranking board? The choice is James Kerr, and we'll find out possibly in a little over 3 minutes' time if he's going to go, again, run the band back together or bring in some new faces.
And they get to go back-to-back. They get that special ability here. They're going to go back-to-back here, and their first pick has officially come in after 90 seconds on the clock. They have officially submitted their draft pick here. So Black Acid Racing will make the second of their draft picks here very shortly. And it's hard to tell where this is going to go at this point. Obviously, you talk about some of the drivers that they picked before, so we're going to know pretty quickly what that's going to be. But if you're going to make changes, now's the time to do it while you've got the ability and you know who's on the board.
Yeah, in turn, again, that's the one advantage here. You get back-to-back. You know what you want. You know it's not going to change from your first pick to your second pick here. So overall, just grab who you want and let's make it work, as Pinnell will step up to the podium and announce the final pick of round number 2.
Yeah, final pick for the 2nd round here in the A² draft for 2025 Black Acid Racing is going to go with Joshua Battles.
Big time decision there. Josh Battles now off the board, and they get to go again here to kick off round 3, the final full round of the draft here. They get to make a pick again. Josh Battles, though, he will once again be featuring in the A² Cup Series season. After previously racing last season, 25 starts in his A² career, 54 total in ARCS. So he's got some longevity to him here in ARCS after joining last year. And now he's going to try to add on to that and try to get some race wins on top of that.
And I will say as well, he also did in the bracket challenge A² does and ARCS do every, well, at first season was the last year. It's the first season they did it. But they had the bracket challenge. Battles did upset Hagen in the first round. So overall, Battles did. And actually, I think he ended up going into the round of 16 as he had a good first 2 rounds where he was able to capitalize some other drivers' misfortune. So Battles now, again, getting a little bit battle tested here. No pun intended. Will now have the chance to go full-time. And this raises the question again. I just announced the drivers they picked in 2024 were Markowski, Battles, and Rupert. Is Black Acid Racing thinking of picking up Brian Rupert here? Do they want to just run the same team back? Did he think, hey, it may not have been the fastest team, but I believe in my drivers. I think they'll improve over the next year, and they didn't cause me no headaches. I enjoyed being with them, and I want to make this team a friendly environment, but also give my drivers I had last season a chance to excel again. We'll find out shortly here, but I think that's at least a thought that Black Acid Racing is thinking here at the very least with James Kerr.
Yeah, and it's fully possible. Excuse me. I'm trying to take a drink as quick as possible because we've been at this for about an hour and 40 minutes, pretty well nonstop here. Yeah, I mean, you could look at Brian Rupert here, but we know that now their pick is in. I was looking at the information screen, and their pick has come in about 2 minutes in this pick to start off the 3rd round. We're going to see whether or not they do, in fact, retain that original lineup to pair alongside James Kerr and Josh Battles and Dale Markowski.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the board as well, And thinking about as we get to this third round here, there's a couple drivers in that camp that are kind of like on draft night, sitting in the green room right now, just waiting and waiting. And it's got to be sweating bullets right now as we had drivers in the preseason rank that we thought were definitely going to be picked in the first round or the second round and are still sitting on the couch, like Chris Flemings, Chris Gones, Nicholas Martinez Jr., Colin McDowell, David Wright, Jared Newton, Blake Galloway, and Nicholas Giampa in both from 1st to 20th. Still yet to be in their names now. And at the rate we're going, there's a chance maybe not any, well, some of them will get picked, but maybe not all of them. And we'll have to sit on the couch waiting for a name that may never get called. But as we kick off the third round here, Ryan Pennell back up to the podium again. And who will Black Acid Racing take for presumably possibly their final pick here in round number 3?
Yeah, Black Acid Racing, this will be their last pick since James Kerr is racing this year, so they won't have a 4th round pick. They are going to go with Chris Fleming for their last pick of the draft.
And that's one of the shoes that we were expecting to drop. It has finally dropped here. Chris Fleming, one of the highest rated rookies on the board, not anywhere close to where we were expecting him to go. He will go pick number 21 in the draft. He was expected to be a top 6 draft pick. He completely slid down the board as teams predicted and went after experience more often than not. Chris Fleming, a runner-up in the High Octane Championship last year, will now find his way on Black Acid Racing to complete that lineup.
And I want to note 2 things, Bill. He's been in the chat this whole time, just waiting for his name to call, and I think he's a bit excited. Obviously, he hasn't said anything yet. Connor Knowlton has said in the chat, very happy for him. And just to kind of add insult to injury, Carolina Beagle, who will be up next, one word Stefan Oberstedt said is just, dang, he is not happy because I think that was going to be his pick if he fell one more name. And, well, Carolina Beagle, back to their already blown-up draft board, will have to think of a new name to pick. But obviously, real fast about Flemings, as we saw, high-octane runner-up, as you see on the screen, a veteran high-octane, rookie now in 2025. Projections on the board put him as, a top 10 driver, presumably by SRH's next-gen rating. Has a good chance to be someone that comes out of the gate swinging and being contention for the Rookie of the Year. Again, will this chip on the shoulder be something that Fleming uses to try to propel him to greater heights? We'll have to see, as we see a few people in the chat saying, put the league on watch, and he's now been picked. But now, back to Carolina Beagle. It's interesting notes. They picked Pennell with the 2nd pick. They got Vincenzo in the 19th. Now that, again, Oberstedt's draft board's in shambles, I assume according to his own words, what is he thinking here? Does he just, again, get someone else from the old Xbox days or someone that he knows that, hey, I know you, I want to work this up? Does he get maybe a rookie, another blue chip prospect on this board? Looking at, again, some of those names that could be blue chips that are still available, like Nicholas Martin Jr. or Colin McNaughton could be a pickup. Does he go with a veteran like David Wright as well, or Chris Gones? Or does he shock us all and go with someone completely out of left field? We'll find out in about 3 and some change. I think this is going to be a long 3, though, as I don't think Oberstedt 100% knows what he even wants.
Yeah, obviously you look at some of the drivers here. You got Chris Gones, Jared Merchant still on the board, Colin McDonough, Nicholas Martinez Jr., David Wright, Nicholas Giampa, Elvis George, Gavin Hudspeth's on the board as well, Tommy Withers, Michael Lawrence, Mark Dila, Jared Newton, Brian Rupert, who we know now is not going to be a Black Acid Racing next year. Or this year, excuse me. Blake Galloway, Austin Mongold, one of the more tenured drivers that's not on a team yet. Connor Morris, Bailey Thompson, Davey Houck, Alfie Sharon Jr., Marshall Harris, Riley Mauricio, Brian, you got James Wright, Patrick Allen, Brian Johnson, Ethan Wood. Those are some of the full-time names that have yet to be selected here. So we're going to know now here soon. I believe they have made a pick. Carolina Beagle has submitted their draft pick here. So Carolina Beagle's timer stops at just over 2 minutes. So we know now that they are on the board and they're going to wrap up their team selection because we know that Steven Oberstedt will also be racing with his team in 2025.
He will be. And yeah, this is all the play for here. This is the chance to settle your lineups. This will be his last pick. What does he think will give his team the best chance to take that next step forward and maybe go from a team that was the lower half of the constructors at the end of the year to be able to get a team higher up? And I think as well, I think he's looking for maybe some stable drivers here that will consistently show up week in and week out. But now as Oberstadt comes to the podium for the final time, what is on the cards as he will announce his last pick in the draft?
With our final pick here in the draft, Carolina Beagle Racing is going to select Gavin Hudspeth, this guy that I've raced with Vinny in the Xbox days, somebody we feel comfortable with. We're going to have some good team chemistry, and we're going to go out there and get some wins.
A fantastic draft pick. Gavin Hudspeth, new to the ARCS community, has made 5 appearances up to this point. But Carolina Beagle Racing feel confident having him on the team. Obviously, talking about the familiarity with Gavin going into this season, it's going to be very helpful getting everyone up to speed here with the Clash at Daytona happening in just 7 days' time.
Yep, and that will be a good test. Because obviously, you don't make driver changes that quickly, but it'll be a good test to see. And obviously, Oberstadt wants to go with familiar faces and names he knows from his old Xbox days. Obviously, Gavin, don't have too much information on him per se, but obviously, knowing his previous history with ARCS, we'll have to see what he does. So now we pivot to high SRD Motorsports. Jonathan Smeal possibly, maybe won't be his last pick. Maybe it will. We'll find out shortly. But at the very least, this is going to be his last full-time pick, or at least in the 3rd round. And we'll see what he's thinking as well. Smeal has sat part-time with multiple different teams. He's seen a lot of drivers. He's watched a lot of broadcasts. He knows, he's seen a lot of faces come in and come out. He's even taken part in other series. So I think he's one of those drivers that has a big pedigree throughout ARCS and other communities. I think if there's anyone that's been maybe could find a diamond in the rough, I think it may be SRD Motorsports here, as they got in 2 good pickups with John Hagan and Matthew Verdon. And now the question is, what will satisfy this lineup? Will be that rear gunner they need? And we'll find out. At least right now, a little bit of time here. It was only at 4 minutes and 30 clock, but looking at what's left, the shocks again. Chris Goins, he was expected to be in the top 10. He is yet not to be picked yet. Looking a little bit further down, Nicholas Martin Jr., Connor McDowell. I do want to share a little bit, maybe shine a light on one name that pops in my mind, Connor Morse. We saw, as personally watching HCL last season, he was someone that was fast, albeit obviously being a young gun, being one of the younger drivers in this draft pool, has definitely got a lot of growing to go. He could be a high upside, but in turn could be a bit of a headache. But some teams that may be looking to win the constructors may take a chance on him, may take a driver that, again, could be a head case. But you know what? If you end up taking the ultimate constructor's glory, you will deal with a little bit of that headache.
Yeah, there's looking at some of the names that are left here. You've still got Chris Goins. You've got Colin McDonough. You've got Nicholas Martinez. David Wright's going to be up there still. You'd have to look at one of the veterans here if you're a little bit further down the order here. David Wright, Tommy Withers, Austin Mongold. I think just kind of looking at this, I think Austin Mongold might be a pick that we see here just because he has that familiarity with John Smeal and with that group. Again, it's so hard to figure out. I don't think Connor Morris. I think Connor Morris has sort of been earmarked for his aggression, and we know how, especially last year, how much those supernovas really flashed out as the season went along here. On top of that, Connor Morris being the youngest driver on the board by a pretty wide margin, I wouldn't be surprised if people just take a flyer and pass on him this year, just because it's so hard to predict where he's going to be. If a team would have picked him, it would have been Carolina Beagle, because they would have had the most scouting information on him, and they've completely waived on that. So I don't think that bodes too awful well. I do think we're going to see a couple more veterans come in through the fold here. I think Mongold's probably going to be one of those picks. He's not a winner in ARCS, but he is a winner elsewhere. Obviously, there's still a couple race winners that are on the board within ARCS. You look at David. I would imagine both David Wright and Tommy Withers will be picked up before this round's over, just because they are the 2 most qualified drivers left on the board. Michael Lawrence, I can see being picked up too. But SRD John Smeal taking his time. We're past 3 minutes now on that timer, and he has not yet submitted a pick that I have seen. We usually get notifications from the draft committee for the ARCS A Square Cup Series that a pick has come in, and that has not been the case yet. And we have 90 seconds to go. Remember, if SRD Motorsports does not make a pick within these 5 minutes, the next team on the clock is Presidential Racing, and they can swoop in and grab one of these drivers before SRD makes their pick. Their timer would begin when that clock hits 0.
True, but I got a hunch I know where Presidential Racing is going to go when they pick the clock, and I don't think it's in the same realm as SRD.
It has to be.
Yeah, it's going to be Alfred George. We saw it happen last year. We saw it happen in 2023. It's got to be him. So there's no real rush for Presidential Racing to run to the podium other than they want to be one number higher.
Inversely, because Presidential Racing know who they're picking, that pick's going to come in super quick, and then it moves to Dirty Air Racing. So SRD has a little bit more pressure because, okay, you've got a flyer with Presidential Racing. You know who they're picking. They're picking one of the most loyal team members you can get. But now you have Dirty Air Motorsports, who you can't predict at all. So that does become a problem.
And in turn, real fast about Austin Mongold real fast. If he doesn't get picked up SRD, there's a good chance he's going to Beatron. So overall, with 20 seconds to go here and still no major information here popping down the line, I think Pannell is running with his card, presumably right now waiting, and we'll see what exactly happens here. But he's running to that podium. He'll be going to that podium regardless, as he'll be announcing SRD's pick. But the question is, as they have just submitted it with 12 seconds to go, quit fitting,
right there.
Yeah, quit fitting that Ryan Pannell's number being 12, and they get it right with 12 seconds to go. So they will get their pick. President Joyce will have to wait, and at least for a little bit, to make their announcement. But now the question is, if they were waiting that long to announce a name, they clearly were debating between two drivers, and I maybe wonder, maybe they're thinking, hey, if Smeal's not going to run this year and we're going to have to use the fourth-for-all pick, we want to make sure, or the fourth-round pick, I should say, do we pick a driver now that we don't think will be on the board in the fourth round, or do we take a chance at who we like and maybe hope that whoever we don't pick will be there by fourth round? But as Ryan Pannell steps up to the podium now, he'll put us out of our misery and we'll announce the third round pick for SRD.
Yeah, the third round pick for SRD Motorsports. This will not be their last pick because John Smeal is not racing this year, so he will have a fourth round pick. But he is going to pick Riley Mauricio with the 23rd pick overall.
This is another rookie. 7 total appearances in the ARCS atmosphere here, but he has made none in the A Square Cup Series. Mauricio, for those that maybe missed it, tried to qualify for the Winstall 400 back a couple weeks ago to kick off the 2025 season. Failed to qualify, like 43 other drivers failed to qualify for that event to kick off the year. But he was spending a lot of time getting up to speed and getting ready to go in the next-gen car over the wintertime. He is someone that, having a little bit of experience racing alongside of him in preparation for that Winstall event myself, he's someone that could be a reliable hand here. He's someone that could fly under the radar. Whether or not he's going to come in and make an immediate splash, looking at the first 3 races of the season, remains to be seen. But he's someone that at least he's a consistent pair of hands, and he's someone that should be a pretty big benefit there for SRD, who's going to be in need of those consistent hands with John Smeal not being on track as a driver this year.
And that's what you need at the very least, and they feel confident that that is their driver. We'll see how these SRD pick in the fourth round, and we'll see who they pick then. But they feel like they couldn't wait on Riley. They felt like that was their pick now. They will take him, and he will now be officially off the board going to SRD Motorsports. So now that will pin us up nicely to Presidential Racing, and I think both you and I, Carmen, we would be kind of shocked if we do not see the driver we're both thinking, the Bahama man, Eldridge George. Obviously, Pannell loves loyalty. He loves supporting loyalty. But if that clock shrinks down maybe past 3, maybe 2 minutes, I think there's going to be a bit of a question.
This has to be one of the quickest draft picks we have ever seen. It has to be.
Yeah.
I would be genuinely surprised if that's not the case. Because remember, there was a kerfuffle about this last year. Because Eldridge George, I don't think was immediately drafted by Presidential Racing. I think it was one of those things where there was a commitment issue and he ended up getting in anyway.
Nope, I'll confirm he did get drafted. Looking at the old draft board here, he got picked up by Presidential Racing in the 3rd round. So he did end up getting drafted officially by Presidential.
Okay, so I remember there was an issue before where he was not on Presidential's. It might be a different series, but he wasn't on Presidential's team, and Ryan was not happy at all about that. So I would not be surprised if that's the case. That being said, we're a minute in, and this draft pick's not been submitted. So whether they're just playing it up like with SRD when they took all 5 minutes, and again, if you're going to deviate from the norm, now's the time to do so while there's veterans still on the table that have that race winning pedigree. If that's what you're looking for, again, the Bahama Boss, Ours George, and I would say last year was probably Ours George's best year. He was a championship contender for the first time in the iRacing era there for himself. He was a championship contender in the high octane series. He was one of the final 5. Ended up finishing, I believe, 4th in the championship standings there. So he had his best year to date last year. Which, I mean, if you're someone that's followed along and been a part of the ARCS community for long enough, that was a big deal for Ours George and the community as a whole. There's not a lot of people that can't. That you can't say bad things about Bahama Boss, about Ours George. You just can't. He is a very likable individual. He's very laid back. He just brings the vibe of just let it go, let it happen. He's sort of one of the drivers that sort of keeps everything at ease in a tense situation. That's why you oftentimes you kind of need someone like him, especially at races like Daytona, because it can be so intense. That being said, we're halfway through the draft timer, and there's been no draft pick submitted for Presidential Racing, so they remain on the clock here, and this could be a big time swerve.
The only other thing I could think of is if Ryan Pinnell said, I'm not going to race at all and just wants to use a 4th round pick, but I don't see that happening by Pinnell. He said last season that he wants to at least make an attempt at some races, so I don't, unless he's thinking of using that 4th round pick in Elfridge George, it's going to be interesting as we're now under 2 minutes and still no sign of Pinnell heading to the podium. This could be the ultimate swerve. We may have to get Vince Russo on the phone because this is a possible swerve of all swerves, or this is dragging it out for the pure drama that, even though we know Ryan, he loves dragging these things out to some degree. He is I would say he's a drama-filled man, but he's definitely a man that loves build the hype for something. Make his series, make his baby proud. So he's going to build this up here. So now with 1:24 on the clock and still no sign yet, the question is, will it be Alfred George or someone else? And if we entertain that thought, what would it maybe a veteran leadership? Because I'm assuming Pinnell seems like the person. He took a flyer on Zier last season, which definitely worked out. I don't know if he goes a newcomer go. He screams to me if he doesn't go Alfred George, he's going a safe pair of hands like a David Wright or a Davey Hawk. Tommy Withers. Someone's been a veteran, been here a while, safe, and will consistently get that car home. But with now 48 seconds and falling, unless he's going to try to make this the longest wait period he can, who knows what he's thinking.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see sort of how this all plays out here, just sort of seeing what all comes to be here. Obviously, Presidential Racing, they are on the board here, and with 25 seconds left to go, their pick's in. So another long wait time here. So we're going to find out if it was a straightforward pick or not. But this is going to be a very interesting sort of time period here to see really where Presidential Racing's head is at going into the late stage of this draft. And we're going to find out in that same vein if they're going to have a 4th round pick or not. They're going to give us all that information pretty up front here.
Yep, I'm here. Sorry, I didn't hear you all throw it to me. Presidential Racing, I do not have a 4th round pick because I am going to be racing this year. I know, shocker, I said I was going to retire. I just can't stay away from it. So we're going to be, this is going to be the last pick for Presidential Racing. Kind of going out on a limb here on someone that a lot of people don't know. but I know him very well. He's a really good friend of mine. Raced with him back on Heat. I'm going with Ethan R. Wood. We know him as E-Dog, so he will be our 4th team member for presidential racing this year.
That's a really big ordeal there. Ethan Wood, an unknown driver, an unknown quality here going into the 2025 season. But Ethan Wood will now be completing that team's lineup here for presidential racing. Ryan Pinnell confirming that he will also be racing in the 2025 season. Ethan Wood, going to be very unknown quality. I have no information on Ethan Wood whatsoever, so we are really flying pretty well into the blind zone here. But Ethan Wood going to obviously be, I think, the big surprise pick of all of this, being the very last entry in the preseason draft board listing. He expected it to very much be an undrafted pick. That is indeed not the case. Ethan Wood picked pick number 24 in round 3 here for presidential racing.
Well, looking around, obviously we saw that in his SRD page. Obviously, there's no information when I search him on the Sim Racing Hub. I can't find anything on him. We look at his SRH Next Gen rating. Obviously, since he's not there, he doesn't have an incomplete number. So he is the perfect example of a unknown commodity. We said that a little bit last year's draft, but we didn't know a lot about some drivers. This is quite literally the unknown, as we have no clue what he is or what he can do. Only thing we know is he raced with Ryan back in the NASCAR Heat days. Presumably did decent enough there that it put, or at least made good friends with Ryan there to make the line. So that is where presidential racing will pick for their final pick. You do got to feel a bit for the Bahama man, Alfred George, as he ended up not getting selected by presidential racing. It does make you wonder if, hypothetically speaking, he does not get picked up, or maybe gets picked up by a later team. We do not know, as Dirty Air is now on the clock. It does make you wonder, maybe if he runs as a privateer, maybe with some factory support from presidential racing. Only time will tell on that one, but we still got at least a handful of picks here to go, looking at 6. So technically 6, possibly 7 for SDR, and then possibly 1 more if B-Tron elects to use, any other driver elects to use that part-time entry. So overall, we'll have to see where it goes, but Elfridge, maybe a bit of a swerve there, but Ethan Wood, hopefully, will be the unknown commodity that brings presidential racing a Constructors' Championship. So moving on, we're now back to 30 Air Motorsports. Gaiman LaJoy were the first-round pick and the second-round pick, respectively. Looking at Gaiman, he thinks 2025 will be his true heel turn, whatever he is thinking on that point, using some good old pro wrestling terminology. The question is now, Feemster, again, first time in charge of a team. He's been through 2 drafts before where he saw names get picked. He saw people get picked. He's sat in that green room. Now he's sitting in the war room. What does he think will make this team complete and be the best support that will give himself, Gaiman LaJoy, the best chance of success for Dirty Air Motorsports?
Again, and there's a lot of really good names up here. I would not be surprised if he picks a Colin McDonough, who raced in the High Octane Series last season in 2024. He's going to have a lot of experience with McDonough. He's going to have a decent amount of experience with David Wright, with obviously with Elvis George, with Tommy Withers as well, Nicholas Jampa as well, raced in the High Octane Series. A lot of these drivers raced in the High Octane Series, and a lot of them have been a lot of the High Octane drivers went off the board. A lot of like Chris Fleming and Vincenzo Iacovazzi, they were off the board. Now, it'd be interesting to see how many of those drivers that are remaining also get selected here with 6 picks to go, while also seeing that there's a bunch of A Square Cup Series veterans on the board as well. So we're going to know in pretty short order sort of where Feemster's mind is at. But looking at how his picks have been, I would not be surprised if he decides to go with someone, like a McDonough or like a Nicholas Jampa. Both those drivers would be pretty decent picks, I would have to assume. And obviously, you're looking at a team. You're looking at a team that's going to have some rookies that are just going to have to grow into the 7th generation car, and build as the season progresses.
Yeah, and again, speaking of obviously growing in the car, we look at, I was saying this earlier, we'll say it again now. Next gen ratings obviously gave us a little percentage of where drivers are. And a lot of those drivers in that 10 to 20 range, even a little bit later, all are kind of separated by maybe a paper clip. Well, again, one bad race here, one good race here may have jumped them up from 18 to 12. So really, it's a good example of you don't really know what you're getting. You're getting a lot of consistency, but the question is, are they underperforming their value or only overperforming their value? Let's look at David Wright. He's a good tire whisperer. He found 2 wins in 2023, did go winless this season. Maybe not the strongest road courses, but will get you a great chance of finding victory at a short track. If we look a bit further down, there's some road course ringers floating around the list as well. Even John Hagan, I know we talked about Connor Morse as well, but Hagan ended up picking Morse for his own team. So overall, obviously Hagan is already his team, and the team any sway he would have had is already gone. But there's still a point there at the very least that there's a lot of names here. Austin Bongold as well, sitting down the board here. Alfred George. There's a lot of names here. As man, pick has been officially committed here. So Dirty Air Motorsports feels confident with their driver. And with Feimster obviously going to race this campaign, this will be their final pick of the draft. Who will be the last piece of this team to try to get them the best chance of success?
Yeah, this is going to be very interesting seeing everything that comes to be here. Again, our draft board, both the official ARCS draft board and the ABN mock draft board, completely blown to smithereens. Not even close. But now we're sort of like taking shots at the dartboard, seeing what it is. I mentioned Colin McDonough, Nicholas Jampa. You're looking at teams that had that longevity to make some of these longer picks that should be able to sort of bounce out pretty quickly here. So that's the aim. McDonough would be top of that list, or you go with veteran experience. Only 2 more A squared race winners on the board with Withers and David Wright. So we're gonna know pretty quickly who goes where.
Yeah, so Dirty Air Motorsports, this will be their last pick of the drive since Kevin Feimster will be racing this year. They have picked Colin McDonough with the 25th overall pick.
This was not a surprise when you look at sort of where Feimster's head was at going through this point. But knowing that McDonough is going to have a ride here is going to be a pretty big ordeal for him. He's been really looking forward to this. So I think Dirty Air Motorsports definitely picking someone for the long haul, and Colin McDonough is going to fit that mold really, really well. McDonough, obviously a veteran of the high octane series, 40 career appearances across different ARCS series, and he gets to now jump forward into the ARCS A Square Cup series in 2025.
Yep, and this will be a good promotion for him, and we'll see what he can do with this newfound opportunity. We've seen tons of drivers come in before as rookies. Some sink, some swim, some tread water. And the question of the day, what will Colin do? Obviously ranked 15th on the preseason ranking. Obviously, interested to note, right around 2 of the drivers have yet to be picked. Actually, 3, pretty much on an island of his own, surrounded by Martinez, Wright, David Wright, Jared Newton, Blake Galloway, and Nicholas Giampa. So a bunch of rookies surrounding him in that class, and he's going to be the first in that kind of 15 to 20 range off the board that will continue onward. So now Raggy Racing is on the clock. The Law, Matthew Kent, is here and ready to pick. First 2 picks, obviously, being Steve Tucker and Pelletier Sharp. Lily Pelletier Sharp kind of went in an interesting direction. Feels like he went a little bit more on the road course side. Obviously, Miss Sharp can drive anything. She obviously won 2 ovals. Steve Tucker's well, pretty good in ovals. But these are also drivers you expect to have decent runs on road course as well. Kind of a full package team, if you will. Maybe not the most shiny option, but unlike some other drivers where, again, if we personally asked them, they would say, I have no chance at winning on a road course. Others, I know I've stinking ovals. With some other drivers would say, this is kind of a consistent team that you expect to at least be top 5, top 10, pretty much week in and week out. And kind of looking at that line, I wouldn't be shocked if Matthew Kent is looking at a name and being like, I want this consistent driver to be what I want. I want you consistently top 10 and top 15 week in and week out.
This is where I think he's going to go for another rookie here. I think he's going to go just kind of spitballing ideas. This is where I think he's going, because he already went with Steve Tucker, he was someone who was expected to go into first round, beginning of second. So he was right on that window there. Chris Goins, Nicholas Martinez, they're 2 rookies that are right there. They don't have any ARCS experience really to mention here. Chris Goins, he has 2 A Square Cup Series starts, and that's it. Martinez has not made a start in ARCS at all. But they both have raced in Cup Series outside of ARCS. They have familiarity with the 7th generation Cup car. Chris Goins, he's got 84 starts in these cars. Martinez has 26 starts in these cars. So Chris Goins, I think, has the veteran experience if you're looking at the two. But I mean, you're picking the unknown. You're sort of taking the gamble, knowing that Matthew Kent, being the consistent driver that he has been over the last year or so. Obviously, he was race control in 2024 in the A Square Cup Series, but he was a super consistent driver both in SNS and in high octane last year. An extremely consistent driver. He's going to be someone that can kind of hold down the fort and let these drivers learn and develop throughout the season, and sort of see where they land on their feet here through Daytona and more importantly in Miami. At the end of February here, when we actually get into the actual start of the season itself. Speed Weeks is just beginning here for ARCS for the A Square Cup Series. So I like the strategy for Matthew Kent. Take some of these rookies that maybe didn't have the full spectrum of knowledge available to the other team owners here. Just sort of take a shot at the dartboard here and see how it lands, because if you need to make changes, you can do that. But I think that it's a smart play. It's a smart play to make.
That's the bright side of A Squared, where you're not stuck in a lineup. If that happens, you have the option to look down the board and say, hey, it's not working out, or a driver isn't showing up sadly anymore, or this driver's underperforming. A Squared gives you that opportunity to make changes at a certain point and try to better your odds. We saw even last year, there was an opening at Next Gen Racing that later became Bant Racing, and that's where Zach Millett slid in, and that was 7 wins for, 1 for Next Gen, 6 for Bandit, and ended up providing great success for that team. So overall, it's not doom and gloom. And in turn, when drivers don't make it, there's privateer entries. There's other ways to get on the grid. And if you perform well, a team will come knocking if someone doesn't hold up their end of the bargain. So we'll have to keep that in mind. But right now, this is going to be the driver that locks you in for at least the first couple races of the season to try to bring your team great glory. And it looks like we'll be joined by the law himself, Matthew Kent, as he will make his team's last selection, presumably here in the draft.
All right, howdy everyone. Raggy Racing will make their final pick here in the 3rd round, as I will be attempting to race throughout the season through my baseball stuff. With their 3rd round pick, we are selecting David Wright to Raggy Racing.
One of the most experienced drivers in the board, now off the board. David Wright, a championship contender in the High Octane Series last year. Most importantly, 54 A Square Cup Series starts in 2 race wins for David Wright in that 42. He's going to fit in just fine as well. Typical Chevrolet driver normally is how David Wright operates. Raggy Racing, one of the 2 Chevrolet teams lined up on the grid. So David Wright fitting in just fine on that board there. So Raggy Racing picking up a driver that fits on multiple occasions there, and they will obviously be pretty excited to get the series started with a bona fide race winner to mix up with some of the rookies and their other drivers here to complete that lineup.
Yeah, I will say I love this pick right now. Matt, again, we've seen David Wright. He got 2 wins last season. When the chips were down at Richmond in 2023, he ended up getting that win and then winning at Daytona as well. But true, that one was more of just right place, right time situation, as a lot of cars ended up going into the fence at College Night last year in 2023. But overall, though, it is good pick. I think he's giving you that. The only thing you can really say is a fault in his game is he is not good at road courses at all. He is definitely going to be lagging behind at those tracks, but on short tracks, on intermediate tracks, he'll save his tires. You'll see him try small strategies. He is definitely someone that could sneak his way into a victory if given the right equipment and the right time. And I think with the polish that Sharp and Tucker bring, this could definitely be a good cohesion unit that will be a sneaky team throughout the year. I think maybe not the flashiest, doesn't have like maybe a true championship contender to some degree. I think that's not insulting to say, at least with both the domination of both Millett and Hagan last season, along with Gaiman. But there is a point where, again, Final Four driver in Sharp, Tucker, Wright, just good team overall. I think Kent had a good draft here. They'll move on to Bowie Motorsports, and they have their 3rd pick, and it's been a draft of know what you know draft, with Feather Place picking Ross Baxter and Brian Dixon, 2 drivers that Feather Place has been very buddy with at the very least. So he's going for more drivers. He is not going to give him gray hairs at a young age. Well, I don't know his age, but assuming at least at a younger age, doesn't want to go grayer at his time. So overall, it is going to be an interesting to see where he goes in this pick. Again, you got some good rookies up there. Does he want to take a rookie, or is he going to look for maybe another veteran like Davey Hawk, like a little bit for like a Tommy Withers? Go for a safe pair of hands that may not be, again, a little bit of a lower ceiling, but will give you consistency and no stress.
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting sort of situation to sort of figure out what they're going to go with here. Again, Brandon Fetterplace, this is where I would say I would have to hazard a guess that maybe, just maybe, you look at someone like a Michael Lawrence, who he's raced with before, to sort of see if you can put that all together. It's just really hard to really try to put that picture together with the options that are currently on the board here. What can you make out of the situation at hand? Again, we're going to find out here. We're about halfway through the timer for this pick. And it's just going to be very difficult for a lot of these teams now going forward. This is going to be this is where you sort of scour any notes you can gather in a quick pinch here. I wouldn't be surprised if it went to Lawrence. I wouldn't be surprised if it went to someone like Withers or one of the other veterans here. But we're going to find out in short form who it's going to be, because that pick has officially been submitted. So the draft committee for the ARCS A² Cup Series has let us know that they have made their pick with about 2:13 left on their timer. So we're going to find out in short order who Brandon Fetterplace thinks is going to be the right person to complete his lineup in 2025.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully we'll get to hear from him, because he is in the war room. We'll see if he has anything to say if he does come in. But this is, again, looking over stat, he said this is one of the toughest drafts he's been a part of, and I wouldn't be shocked if some other team owners have that same thought, especially first-time team owners that may have to go through the ringer here again. So this pick is in. Only Toyota team on the field, so it'll be interesting to see what they think will gel well with their Toyota machinery. So, and obviously, again, coming from the pedigree of what Line Power was, obviously Tom Sears definitely led a great ship with two championships back to back, and again, probably rubbed off some of that good influence on Featherplace. So we'll see what he can do, as Ryan Pinnell is now stepping up to the podium to presumably, and I would assume, announce the final pick of Bowie Esports and what they will pick here with their last pick.
Yeah, this will be the last pick for Bowie Esports, as Brandon Fetterplace will be racing, so no fourth round pick for them as well. They're going to go with Jared Merchant for their last pick of the draft.
That really is going to put a feather in the cap there. That kind of will put 1MA Racing on the back foot, because they have the upcoming pick for this. Jared Merchant did not quite fall to that last pick for 1MA Racing, but he is going to be racing in the ARCS A² Cup Series. He'll just be racing for Bowie Esports. He'll be racing for that Toyota team for 2025. So Merchant locked in, but it won't be the 1MA connection that we were expecting to see in 2025. He will instead be a pick early. Not a bad pick. He was someone that we were expecting to be drafted. He was someone we were forecasting would be a part of the 2025 field. And obviously more than one team agreed on that front. So not a bad pair of hands here. Merchant, 2 career Cup Series starts. He was mostly in a fill-in basis here, but he's been a part of that 1MA Racing group for now the better part of 3 years. He was alongside Jacob Blankenship and Bren Roberts when they both came into ARCS, and they both lit up the 2022 season as well. So I mean, Jared Merchant, if he's anywhere in that same vein, and a lot of conversation says that he should 100% be a factor in some of these races coming up in 2025.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, limited experience, but got to look at the previous history and the track record, and definitely a name to keep an eye out for with some of those starts and some of those things. But definitely, we'll have to note him. Could easily be a Ross Pax, or could be someone else that was a good rookie, but obviously, with last year's rookie class being so strong, even if he had a decent season, it was going to be hard to overtake when the top 2 rookies equivalated for about 16 wins last year. So which pretty much half the calendar, even more. So technically, kind of hard to shine through that. Actually, 18 if you clout Sharp's 2 victories as well. So overall, very hard to crack through that. Now, moving further on, we're at the 1 a.m. racing, and this is what we alluded to, at least I alluded to last time they were picked up. It was going to be a long time till they got the pick again. They were hoping Merchant may have fell to them. That did not precise. And now, presumably, again, Bren Roberts is probably going to run the full season. They're going to have this as their last pick. What do they do here? Does Roberts pull something out of his bag of tricks and go with a wild card? Does he go with someone he knows? We look at what's left. If we look at the top 10, the only name left that hasn't been picked yet is Chris Goins, who is yet to find a home. Inside the top 20, we have Nicholas Martinez Jr. and Jared Newton and Blake Galloway and Nicholas Giampa. And then some other notable names from last season yet to be picked include, like we said, Davey Hawk, who ran Privateer most of the season, and Tommy Withers and Austin Mongold, to name a few of the names that didn't get picked, and Alfred George as well. And let's not sleep on Michael Lawrence and Mark DeLayla, as Lawrence is in this chat right along with DeLayla, along with Wright, Battles, and Rupert. So there's a lot of veterans that raced last season, raced the full campaign, and they, with only a handful of picks left, looking at the board, we have 3, possibly 5, depending on, at the minimum, a maximum of 4 at the moment, seats left. And some of those regulars last season are either going to have to go privateer or are going to have to race on a lower year and hope 2026 is the magical number for them in finding a ride for next season.
Yeah, 1MA Racing's going to have to make a really tough decision. I think they were really banking that 1MA Racing would not take Jared Merchant off the board here, so they are really trying to scramble to put all of this together, and that's going to be just so difficult for them.
Yes, it is going to be very difficult indeed. And like I said, Feemster as well, firing off the chat as well. Hardest draft and hard decisions he had to make. So if Oberstadt and Feemster both kind of, one of them being obviously second draft he's been in, Feemster first draft he's taken part of, and obviously this being Roberts' first draft, again, if they're struggling, what do you think other drivers are thinking as well here, and team owners? So yeah, this will be a noteworthy situation. Take the book, throw it out, as our mock drafts are basically dunzo basically. But if we look at what was expected at this pick in round 3, it was going to be Mark DeLayla, so take that note in mind. But at this point as well, we had Withers, Lawrence, Del Markowski was supposed to be picked in the 3rd round, just to note that, as well as Nicholas Martin Jr., Chris Goins were all supposed to be picked in the 2nd round. So a lot of drivers in your mock draft, as long as my mock draft, pretty much just ripped up and have not been picked yet, and there's a good chance at least 1 or 2 of them will be sitting on that couch come Speed Weeks next week.
A little over 3 minutes is what they took here, but 1MA Racing have submitted their draft pick here, so we're going to know who their last draft pick is going to be in the 2025 draft. And again, some veterans, some rookies here, all of them sort of out of position from where we thought they would be at this point. But we're going to know in pretty quick order who 1MA Racing and who Bren Roberts believes will be the best person to complete their lineup in 2025. Jared Merchant off the table really kind of messes things up for them. But you still have the likes of Chris Goins, who I think right now is the highest rated rookie in the board. You have, obviously, Tommy Withers, a former race winner. You have Michael Lawrence, who has that experience as well. Same with Mark Dila. You can find someone like Brian Rupert down the board pretty easy. Blake Galloway, who raced with Bren in the HTL Cup Series. They shared a ride for part of the season 4. So there's some familiarity throughout this board. So we're going to find out in quick order what Bren Roberts has come to think about who's left on this board and who is going to complete that lineup. Ryan Pinnell gets to walk to the podium and make that announcement.
Yeah, 1MA Racing with their final pick in the draft. They're going to go with Elric George here in the their last pick of the draft.
Elric George will have a ride in the 2025 season. He'll race with Ford as well, racing with 1MA Racing. He will complete the lineup there for 1MA Racing. A really big deal for Elric George. He will once again find consistency in the A-Square Cup Series field. And that gives us just a couple more drivers left to go in this lineup for the 3rd round at least. We're looking sort of at where the draft board is right now. We're going to have 4 more picks essentially here with Elrich George now off the board.
Yeah, and that's obviously, again, it's going to be a different address for Elfridge George, but obviously he's done enough. He's made some good friends in the series, showed some good improvements, and Brent Roberts wants to give him a chance here. Again, pretty much probably in the same paint scheme. He always, in every series he runs those Pennzoil machines, and obviously, he's changed up in the past, I would assume, but we'll have to see. But I wouldn't be shocked if he at least breaks out a Pennzoil scheme at least once this season, and pretty much same car, possibly a similar number, but a different address for the Bahama Man. Pick 28th for 1MA Racing. So that will ping us on to pick number 29 with B-Tron Racing and Jeremy Braille, the other owner that we at least assume will possibly be taking a 4th round pick as well. If they do to use that 4th round pick, they obviously will get a short order. So obviously they'll have pick 29, they'll have pick 31. So they will have some time to think, but they won't have too much time if they elect to use it. So honestly, right now, if I'm looking at the board, I'm thinking there's one name that screams out to me, and that's Austin Mongold. We saw him drive under B-Tron last season. We've seen him drive with B-Tron, at least partnership somewhat with B-Tron in HDL and some other series. So Braille looks kind of happy with the progress Mongold's made and seems kind of good with them. So I would not be shocked if the Dr. Pepper Man is going to be racing for B-Tron's colors next season.
Yeah, we're going to find out here. If you're looking, if for someone, the thing with Braille is that they're going to have back-to-back picks here with 29 and 31. Sunday Monday Racing will have a pick in between them here. And again, not a hard pick at all for them apparently, because their pick's already in with just a minute into their window here. They have made their pick pretty easily, and Kevin, you might be right. I think it could easily be Austin Mongold. If it's a pick that quick, we've not seen those quick pick selections in quite a while, so it very well could be the good old barbecue Coke man, Austin Mongold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll have to see here, as that was pretty much the quickest work we had in the 3rd round. Other than that, though, obviously, like I've said, you can't count anyone at B-Tron to win the 500 in a couple weeks' time. Obviously, if Braille takes a seat there, he will probably try to at least go for a 3-peat in the 500, but time will tell. But speaking of Braille, he is now stepping up the podium to announce his 3rd round pick, and we'll see if he also has a 4th round pick on the cards.
So, B-Tron Racing selects the one, the only, the Sydney Sweeney lover, the Dr. Pepper drinking, Florida man himself, Austin Mongold.
Not shocking at all.
Absolutely fantastic. We were expecting it to be Austin Mongold to be in this selection. He is. Jeremy Braille obviously on board with Austin as well, bringing him back here for the 2025 season. Again, the biggest question mark going into this now is obviously we know John Smeal is going to be drafting in that 4th round. No indication from Jeremy Braille if he was drafting in the next round. So
yeah, well,
that's interesting.
Yeah, we'll have to ask. Obviously, we won't see Ryan Pinnell for a little bit because we'd only presumably see him at the team in question SRD Motorsports pick, as that's what he's been announcing for. But obviously, Wanzing will most likely be in here to announce his final pick and the last pick for the 3rd round here, as he will be running full-time, bearing obviously internet problems, but he will be running full-time. So that raises the question. If you haven't been picked yet, there's a chance of 1 or 2 more after this pick. There's a max of 1, a minimum of 1, possibly 2, depending on what B-Tron does. But the question is, Sunny Man Racing, they picked Edward Marshall and Elliot Longerneck to be the first 2 picks. Kind of following that train of thought, you would assume they would go with possibly another E name, but the only other E name on the board were Ethan R. Wood and Elfridge George. So they're going to have to go a little bit different if they want to go with the consistency of ease. Other than that, again, Nicholas Martin Jr. comes to mind. You got Chris Goins as well, Blake Galloway, Nicholas Giampa, Bailey Thompson, Connor Morse. A lot of names here that are still sitting on the couch. Tommy Withers as well. Honestly, if I had to throw out a name, I'm probably going to go Tommy Withers where we're going to go here, but we'll see. But at the very least, chat's loving the pick that Braille made there. At the very least for the flair that they put on Austin Mongold's name.
Yeah, it's amazing to see. Obviously, Jeremy Braille on board with that completely. Lit it up there for what could be his last pick. Again, we had no clarification. A lot of us when we were looking at the draft board, looked at Beatron as a pick that may have popped up here as being something that we could have said. Unless Jeremy Braille's and something cleared up and he's going to be able to at least start the season, then he wouldn't need to make that draft pick. So it would leave it down to one more pick if that's the case for John Smeal's team, SRD Motorsports. And again, all of that is very much up in the air at this point. We do know Sunday Money Racing has one more pick, and they are on the clock right now. They have been about a minute and 30 seconds into their last pick selection here. And this is where I would look at a lot of camaraderie here, a lot of teamwork here. Seth Wansing's worked with Tommy Withers a lot in the HCL Cup Series. They were on the NFG Motorsports team together. Getting Withers to race a Chevrolet could be a bit of a hard time, but Withers, I think, would be the number one pick as far as like who's left on the board here. Otherwise, you would have to evaluate someone like Chris Goins. You'd have to go for one of the rookies at this point, I think.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to make a splash, you either go for a veteran like Withers or you take a splash on a rookie like Goins or Martinez or Jampa. You've created your little pocket as far as where you're going to be operating around. It just sort of does Seth want that experience on the team, or is he going to go with what Matthew Kent's done, and is he going to go and splash on the new faces and see what they've got, take that gamble there. Very interesting to see how Seth really approaches this, because Seth has traditionally been someone that's preferred having the experience alongside him. He's someone that likes having the obviously the experience, the veteran leadership alongside him here. That's traditionally how he's been. But obviously he tried it last season and it didn't work out the way he had expected it to. Really a disappointing season on his behalf. So maybe he does mix it up here. Maybe there's a name on here that he has been sort of hammered down, and now that it's go time, this is the last pick, go ahead and take that swing. It's so hard when it's so late. You're just you're going based off of gut check and vibes, and it's so hard to get that right.
Yeah, personally, I think he's going. I think he's going veteran there, and I think it's Tommy Withers. And sorry for the little stumble there. I was watching the football game, and something big happened. But anyway, it is going to be interesting to see as the clock is still ticking out here, as we got a minute and 12 to go here, and. Yeah, as we do see him walking in now, so he has submitted his pick without actually stopping the clock here. So we will see what Seth Wansing thinks here for his final pick. I think it's going to be veteran. I think we'll see what he goes here in question and see what he picks up. So Seth, you have the floor. What is going to be the final pick here for myself and Carmen to see what you're picking?
With Sunday Money's last pick in the A-Square 2025 draft, Sunday Money will take veteran Tommy Withers with their last pick in the 2025 draft.
Big time deal there. Sunday Money Racing with Tommy Withers. We expected a little bit of veteranship to be made here, and that is indeed the case. Tommy Withers off the board finally with the 30th pick in the draft. He is the final full-time pick in this draft. Now it's down to the 4th round for just the team owners that are not racing. Do we know if Beatron is going to be racing with Jeremy Braille racing at Daytona, or are we going to see someone different there? We're going to find out here, but Sunday Money Racing has selected Tommy Withers to complete this round of the draft. Round 3 now completed with Tommy Withers being pick number 30, and I feel like that was quite a fall for Withers as well, given his experience not only in these cars, but he is a race winner, and not everyone has the ability to say that. For Withers to fall that far.
Oh, yeah. I think I wouldn't say it's an insult for Withers, but I would be kind of like wondering, what do I have to do to get drafted earlier? Again, veteran. The only thing you could say is he didn't take a lot of races last season, only raced 15 events, but obviously won in 2023, made the playoffs, looking at as well. Even last season in his limited runs, he got a top 5 and 3 top 10s. He raced similar to drivers like Alfred George. Obviously, he finished a little bit ahead of Alfred George. And as well, right around the lengths of Mike LaJoy and James Kerr. So, obviously, Kerr is an owner, but still worth noting that he raced around competition that has been drafted, like Battles, LaJoy, and himself now picked up. So, yeah, this is going to be noteworthy, as it looks like through the updated graphic, though, we can confirm that B-Tron will be taking...
no confirmation on this at all.
Oh, no confirmation.
This is very much in case this is happening, the timer is up. Either B-Tron is on the board or it's SRD that's on the board. And again, we don't have any confirmation on that at all right now, on whether or not that it's going to be Braille or Smeal on the board. And I have confirmation now that it is B-Tron Racing that is on the board. So indeed, Braille will not be a driver, at least to kick off this season. So B-Tron Racing is on the board here. We do know that for a fact. So we're going to go ahead and start that timer there now that we know that they are on the board. Sunday Morning Racing pick Tommy Withers up next. So now we've got 2 more picks to go. We know that for sure. B-Tron Racing and SRD Motorsports will be the last 2 to make their picks. And we're going to know very quickly who it is going to be, because that timer, I'll go ahead and put it to a stop here. Realistically, they had about a minute into their board here, but they are now determined who their last driver is going to be here. And we will hear, hopefully, again, very shortly from Jeremy Braille, who has a knack for introducing his upcoming drivers here pretty spectacularly. Based off of how he announced Austin Mongol just a few minutes ago. So 30 drivers have been picked so far. 8 of the team owners will also be drivers. So to kind of walk through everyone, there's 2 picks remaining. One to determine the 4th driver for B-Tron Racing, which is what we're on right now. And then the last pick of the draft will be that of SRD Motorsports, being led by John Smeal. Smeal will also not be a driver in the season, so they get an extra entry, get an extra draft pick to fill up that empty seat as well. So we get to determine all of that here. B-Tron Racing really quick on the gun to put all of this together. And we're going to hear from Ryan Pinnell. He's going to walk to the podium to announce the penultimate draft pick in 2025.
Yep, so B-Tron Racing, with their last pick in the A-Squared draft, is going to go with Michael Cheeseburger Lawrence as their 4th driver for 2025.
Michael Lawrence, we were wondering if he would get picked here. We thought he was going to get picked by Bowie Esports there with Brandon Fetterplace. That was not the case. He will instead drive for the 2-time defending championship producing team for B-Tron Racing. Really good company to be in there. If you're Michael Lawrence here, he will join a very tight group going into 2025, and he will fill in for what would have normally been the car driven by the former champion himself, Jeremy Braille. 22 career starts in the A-Square Cup Series. He's made 10 starts in ARCS outside of the A-Square Cup Series. So he's got some experience. This is the right place for him to gain more of that experience and to turn into a potential contender in the championship campaign.
Yeah, this is a good team, definitely to learn him. We can see in the chat right now, he is over the moon excited with being picked up here at pick 31. Against the conventional wisdom where we see him, but hey, a ride is a ride, and he will take this opportunity and run with it, as he will now be pick 31 here for B-Tron. And that will also include as well that we will have a new 500 champion, as with Braille no longer taking part here, at least for the opening rounds. He will not be able to go for the 3-peat, meaning one of these drivers we're currently listing off right now is in a chance. Obviously, there are some privateer entries, but at the very least, one of these 31, now to be 32 drivers, will probably be hoisting a trophy in a couple weeks' time. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We still got to figure out who the last pick of the draft is. Mr. Irrelevant will be finding his home at SRD Motorsports. The question of the day is, who will that lucky driver be? Let's take a look at the board real fast one more time. We got Chris Gones, who is expected to be a top 10 pick. He is still sitting there in the green room, waiting, pausing for his name to be called. We got some rookies, Nicholas Martin Jr., Jared Newton, Blake Galloway, Nicholas Giampa on the board here as well. Could be looking for a home. Bailey Thompson as well. A few other, and some veterans as well, a little bit down the line. We're looking at Mark DeLayla as well, possibly looking, Davey Hawk looking for homes as well, along with Bryant Rupert and James Wright. So a lot of drivers from veterans to rookies to big names, as it looks like, as we have someone join us now, is going to be time to announce the final pick here for the draft and who will be the last car on the field of full-time entries, partnered up with SRD Motorsports. John Smeal, take us away. Who is Mr. Irrelevant?
Mr. Irrelevant will be none other than Jared Newton, will be my 4th pick.
Big time choice there. Jared Newton was expected to be picked in the middle of the 2nd round with how things are looking here. It was not sure if he would be a full-time driver or not. He made that a commitment back in December, and now he's going to be completing the SRD Motorsports lineup, someone who has he's only made one ARCS start in the entirety of his career. He raced in the High Octane Series at Kansas last season, started 6th in that race, so he was off to a really hot start. And so he's going to join that team at SRD Motorsports and try to get that team into a very top running condition here in quick order. Again, a lot of these teams now that they've got their teams put together, they have to do a lot of work in 7 days to get on the same page going into the Clash at Daytona next weekend. But we know now that Jared Newton is the final pick, the 32nd pick of the 2025 draft. It is Jared Newton who is on the board, and he has completed this draft here as the last pick. It leaves a lot of drivers without a ride to kick off the season. They can still race as privateers, and obviously they can be picked up as obviously fill-ins or as substitutes. Chris Gones, Nicholas Martinez Jr., Nicholas Jampa, Michael Lawrence, who was drafted earlier. He was drafted by Beatron Racing, so he's got a ride. Mark Dilla, though, not the case. Neither is Brian Rupert, Blake Galloway, Connor Morris, Bailey Thompson, Davey Houck, Alfie Sharon Jr., Marshall Harris, James Wright, Patrick Allen Jr., and Brian Johnston will also be on the outside looking in, and he'll have to sort of race their way in and qualify their way in here to start off the 2025 season. But Jared Newton will not have that issue. He will be a locked-in driver for SRD Motorsports, their 4th driver in 2025, and that completes the full draft order.
Yep, and there's a lot of interesting names here. Obviously, we also have possibly some part-time entries we may see as well, or at the very least, part-time drivers that may be looking for fill-in rides. So there's a lot of noteworthy names that are currently still out there, just waiting, hoping for an opportunity to do something. And question of the day is, now the 32 drivers are set, they can head off into Speed Weeks next week and try to get ready. And that may be our first test to see where these drivers lies. Obviously, it's no longer going to be at the Coliseum. It's going to be at the High Banks Daytona again. So bit of a preview of what's to come for these drivers. It could be a little bit of a, hey, even though Daytona may not be the perfect representation as it is a plate track, it's still going to show you who's blending well with the teams and getting off on the right foot, and who may be a bit struggling before we truly get in the Speed Weeks after the big game Sunday in a couple weeks' time. But overall, if I had to look at the draft right now and see who I think has the best team out of the list, honestly, there's a lot of solid teams. I think a lot of solid names here that I think everyone kind of drafted well for the most part. I don't think any outliers. But something's calling me to Raggy Racing. Something that consistent lineup of Tucker, Sharp, Wright, and Kent. I think they had a quiet draft here. And true, again, like I said, when they picked, they didn't get a big name like a Millett or a Hagan, but they got a consistent name in Steve Tucker who can go out there and get you top 10, top 5 in limited sample size. You got Liz Peltier Sharp as a Final Four driver, can get some good strategies, knows how to save the tires and get you good results. And you got David Wright, who's a short track wonder, who, when going gets down, can also find a way to victory lane. So a lot of good teams, a lot of good drivers. I think other notes include Beatron Racing as well, along with SRD Motorsports. But I think my top team of the draft, I got to give it to Raggy Racing.
Let's go over we're going to go ahead and just do a brief recap as to who went where in this draft. Dale Markowski was the first pick there for Black Acid Racing. Cody Pinnell went to Carolina Beagle Racing. All this is going to be at the top of your screen. John Hagan, our defending series champion, went 3rd overall to SRD Motorsports, so they've got some strong numbers there as well. You've got Zach Millett for Presidential Racing. Josh Gaiman got picked 5th overall for Dirty Air Motorsports. Steve Tucker went to Raggy Racing. You talked about Raggy Racing possibly being the team that won the draft here. Ross Baxter went to Bowie Esports. Daniel Michelle went to 1MA Racing. Obviously, you've got Patrick Oberstadt went to Beatron Racing, and Edward Marshall went to Sunday Money Racing. That was the way round 1 ended up there for you. Round 2, a little bit different. Elliot Longenecker for Sunday Money Racing, former Team Sideswipe driver, now back into the fold here in ARCS Racing for Sunday Money Racing, and Jonathan Adams joining Beatron Racing. So Patrick Oberstadt, Jonathan Adams, all a part of the Beatron Racing squad alongside Austin Mongold and Michael Lawrence as well. So pretty stacked group there in the Beatron Racing camp. But as we sort of browse and further along, again, all this is scrolling at the top of your screen here. You have Jonathan Adams, who was drafted by Beatron. Connor Knowlton was drafted by 1MA Racing. So Ben Roberts has got some pretty reliable hands there with Knowlton. Brian Dixon, one of the rookies, with no ARCS experience. Brian Dixon drafted by Bowie Esports as their second-round pick. Louis Pautier Sharp joined Steve Tucker there for Raggy Racing. Mike LaJoy went to Dirty Air Motorsports. Christian Angel went to Presidential Racing. Matt Vorndren went to SRD Motorsports, obviously linking up with his dirt racing buddies there. Vincenzo Iacovazzi went to Carolina Beagle Racing. Carolina Beagle Racing had to just try and browse and peruse with their draft order, completely shot up. Josh Battles completed the second round of the draft, going to Black Acid Racing, who, as it was last year, it remained the same this year. It wasn't until round 3 that Black Acid Racing made their changes going around the board there. Again, just a very interesting way that this draft really developed.
Yeah, you can definitely say that again, how interesting. We had a lot of shocks early on. Some teams went for more what they felt comfortable with rather than maybe what was top of the board. And we saw it throughout the night. And like you said, the name of the game, teams feel confident what they get. I think a lot of drivers' teams have gotten good lineups here. And I think when we see the end of speed weeks, I think we'll see some teams start to fluctuate out. I think others may be looking to maybe press the reset button and try to scour free agency and find some of the drivers. But those drivers sitting on the couch right now, sitting in the green room, maybe a little bit discouraged they get draft. Don't give up hope yet. There's still plenty of time throughout the season. Drivers will drop. Others that just keep doing your thing, trying to get some experience, and maybe we'll see you before the season ends. But let this be a chip on the shoulder. Let it be a building block that there's still a chance to crack this grid. But for the 32 drivers that made it, congratulations. And on the speed weeks, we will see you in, the Clash in about a week's time.
Absolutely amazing job there for all the drivers that did get drafted here. Again, just a lot of fun just kind of following along as this draft went along. For everyone that tuned in with us tonight, you get to see us again here on YouTube next Sunday, 7 p.m. It is the Clash at Daytona to kick off the Speed Weeks for the ARCS A Cup Series. And then we have ARCS Daytona 500 qualifying and the duels for that. That kicks off the month of February for us here. That is February 2nd. So you're going to want to tune in to all that. Both of those live streams are available now for you to set reminders for on our channel here at AVN Studios. But that does us here. Almost 3 hours of draft coverage for the ARCS A Cup Series. It's always fun being able to cover the drafts. It's something that's so unique compared to everything else we cover here on ABN. Join us again next weekend. It'll be me and Kevin here in Daytona to cover the Clash for Daytona. It's going to be absolutely electric seeing these teams figure out each other in real time. So on behalf of everyone here, on behalf of everyone for ARCS, for the A Cup Series and all of its partners, on behalf of my co-commentator Kevin Young, I'm Carmen Sienna. Stay safe, stay warm, stay healthy. We'll see you next Sunday. So long, everybody.